putting this on the internet, so you chew with your mouth closed.
So the audio for this one's probably not going to be very.
I'm probably not gonna. You know what, I don't know if we'll make, you want some water?
Thought about selling my house.
So it's actually running now.
Okay, Mayor, we're ready.
We're going live.
Mayor, we're live.
You're live. 5, 4.
I'm no dummy.
Heck yeah, I do.
Like
my bald spot.
where I need to go to.
Yeah, oh, what's that? If I polish my head like yours, I shine.
Yeah, Carl, me and you have to be placed so we don't glare the camera, right?
Right.
No, almost.
Christina's husband's gonna give you a run for your money,
We're ready.
Okay, so.
We're live.
Not bad.
So this is my
100 North Ogden City.
controlling the stream.
Well, welcome everyone to the City Council Work Session meeting. Thank you, Planning Commission, welcome to the work session. Also appreciate those of you who are here. We had a field trip, just for the record, at 5 p.m. And I think it was well attended this time, so thank you everyone that was able to make it there. Was to go out and look at some fence situations, which will be part of the discussion this evening. We also, of note, are broadcasting on YouTube for the first time tonight, so when you wanna go back and see what was said, that'll be there.
Can we see it live?
Yes, it's on YouTube. How do we find it?
Just search North Ogden
Watch
City.
yourself, watching yourself.
North Ogden City. I find a lot of videos on it, but not the
There's a new
channel.
term besides selfie that's gonna show up here in this meeting.
It's gonna see, this is gonna see a video of a video of a video, be like.
Okay, yeah.
Should I get my
There,
best
there
side?
it is. Okay, please,
Looking in
if you
a
watch it, don't turn the volume up, we'll probably have some.
Well, you may
You
not
have
have
loop and
pretty
echo.
clear audio.
Where did
Okay.
Where did you go?
Live stream.
North Ogden City?
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's a delay. Okay, enough fun. Let's go back to our meeting.
delay.
I don't know how long we'll see. So we've got invocation pledge of allegiance this evening to start our meeting. Councilwoman Stoker, I've asked her to please offer the invocation and lead us in the pledge.
Heavenly Fathers, we come together to discuss the things about the city and to make decisions. We always ask that thou will be with us and help us in making the decisions and making decisions that are right for our city and for our residents. We are grateful for the opportunity we have to serve, and we're grateful for the residents who support us and who care enough to come to meetings or to listen and to watch. We're thankful for this area that we live in and the rain that we have received. We pray now that we'll be able to discuss these things and be able to come to decisions that work for all of us and for the residents, and say this in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you for that, Councilwoman Stoker, and note, our work meetings are a little different than a normal meeting. In the work meetings, we just move around the table, it's more for discussion and information, and generally, the topics are just discussion items, no final decisions are reached on them for the most part. Generally, they'll be coming back at a future council meeting. And then a couple times a year, we do a joint meeting with the Planning Commission to talk together about items that are important and that are coming up before both bodies. There's also usually food at the work session, especially because we had a field trip tonight, so please help yourselves. There's cookies and brownies and things up there, including audience, ladies and gentlemen. You are more than welcome to please go on up behind and there, grab some food there. So with that, just a reminder too to please silence all cell phones for the duration of the meeting. And we'll go ahead and jump in. We do have one item for the council consent agenda before we get into the work session, which is the minutes of the September 20th city council meeting. Is there any comments on those or a motion?
Move to approve consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes on the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So those are approved. We'll now go to the active agenda. First is public comment period. If any of you, ladies and gentlemen, would like to speak to the council and planning commission on any of these topics or another topic of city business, we invite you at this time. You can just stand up and talk since the microphone is in use right now and the podium for the audio, broadcasting.
So, I meant I had pictures, but a lot of us were just there at our property. My name's Christina Watson, and I'm 1820 North, 100 East. So, regarding the fence height regulations, we feel that the side yard of a corner lot should be able to be fenced and included in the fence, and not just a half fence, but a full privacy fence. We have a big, busy family and a busy backyard, and we feel like the backyard could be an extension of your home, that the privacy is important to us, and we also feel like that side yard could be fenced in a way that we could still enjoy our side yard, but we could cut the corner with a sight line triangle, has a line triangle, that would be safe. In addition to, there could be something met in the middle, that safety and our privacy and property could be respected. So we just feel like whatever that distance that you feel is safe would be described in the new ordinance, and that whatever that distance is, we'll cut the corner and we'll abide by it. We feel like right now where we're at, we have a pretty good safe distance, but if that's not safe enough, then we'll cut the corner and make it even more. So we just encourage that be expanded, that ordinance be expanded to do that. And we also feel like the 50% visibility fence, where it is 6 feet high, we still feel like that isn't privacy. You couldn't have a party without the whole neighborhood watching. You couldn't have your kids running around having a water fight without everyone watching. So anyway, that is our opinion, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mrs. Watson.
Leonard Looney, 2527 North, 525 East. I just wanted to say that I took the advantage of going on the field trip that you had, and I'm grateful you let us come besides just you guys going around to do that. It was educational for me to see those things in the city. I listened to the discussion weeks ago when we had it. You could probably tell me when. And I agree that there need to be safety concerns adhered to. And we've told stories about, Councilwoman Stoker has told stories about getting hit because people weren't paying attention. We need to provide that, I agree, and we need those safety lines. But I also feel for the privacy that the Watsons want to have in their yard. And I think that we need to make sure that whatever I don't have anything to do with it, I guess, except that I get to vote for you guys. I think you as a council should draft an ordinance that will clearly define for people like me what I can do on my own property. because I wanna provide that safety, but I still wanna have some ability to use my own yard, so. But mostly, thank you for letting me go on the field trip, and to you guys for going and doing such things so that you see them and see what's going out there. And just appreciate what all of you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lumen. And you know you're a regular when you start being able to do my job on getting people's names and addresses.
Once or twice.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, then. We'll go on now to discussion on fence height. This item has been discussed several times by the planning commission. It's been something that was brought up by residents of the city to have this be looked at again for some of the reasons that Mrs. Watson outlined. And so our city planner and planning commission have done a lot of work on this. We wanted to bring the council up to speed on how that discussion has gone, the recommendation that came out of the planning commission, so council could hear the thought process, and then at some near future point, this will come before the city council based on the outcome of the discussion tonight. So Rob, before the next bite, why don't I identify to you or Brandon, I'm not sure who's gonna take this one, but our city planner, Mr. Rob Scott, and his assistant Brandon Bell are here to kind of help facilitate this discussion, so I'll turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Mayor. Brandon has been assigned to handle this one, and we'll let him go forward.
Okay, so we just finished up our second field trip on the fence site issue. The current ordinance that we have in place, we had an applicant in April come to us who had a frustration with the current ordinance because he has an autistic grandson and is in the side yard of the home, which is the space between, on a corner lot, it's the space between the sidewalk on the side of the home and the actual home. Is our current ordinance only allows a 3.5 foot solid fence. So he said, well, this, you know, my autistic grandson can climb that in a heartbeat, really doesn't keep him out of the street. I need something that's gonna be more safe. So the proposed ordinance that the planning commission has recommended to the city council at this point in time allows a option for a 3.5 foot fence that's solid that comes right out to the property line, which is 1 foot behind the sidewalk. But it only allows a 6 foot fence. It does allow a 6 foot fence if that 6 foot fence is 50% see-through or greater when looking directly through the fence. Currently, so the option that's proposed does not allow a 6 foot solid fence, or in other words, a 6 foot fence that you cannot see through. However, as those of you who have been on the field trip know, there are a number of, if not the majority of fences that are installed on corner lots have a 6 foot solid fence. So from an enforcement issue, that's something that needs to be considered in the final ordinance. And there, another issue with our current ordinance, not the proposed ordinance, is that the way that we regulate it and the way that it's written, it says that if you've got actually we have the handout, there's 2 situations that it contemplates and deals with. The first is that it allows a 3.5 foot tall solid fence that can come right up to the property line in the side yard. You can see the dashed line on that top picture. And then a 6 foot tall fence is allowed to the edge of the side plane of the home. That's in a situation where the driveway is adjacent to the rear yard of the corner lot. Now, the weakness with our current ordinance is that it uses the term adjacent. It doesn't specify a specific distance from which the driveway has to be from that rear yard in order to be considered adjacent. So in the lack of that more specific guidance, the way it's been interpreted is that the driveway, if the garage and driveway are on the side of the home that's closest to the corner lot, the rear yard of the corner lot, it's been considered adjacent. If it's on the opposite side, it's been not considered adjacent. And so The second situation, Annette, if you could scroll down a little bit, thank you. The second situation is when the driveway is not adjacent to the corner lot, or in practical terms, that's been interpreted as on the opposite side of the home. In that situation, we do allow a 6-foot solid fence in the side yard. So with the proposed ordinance, one thing that needs to be thought about is that we're actually taking away, under the current version of the proposed ordinance, we're taking away the ability for a homeowner, basically under any situation, to have a 6-foot solid fence in their side yard. And one of the reasons why that's an issue is we've seen the majority of fences in side yards on corner lots that are 6 feet are solid. So there's a lot of fences that are currently out of compliance that are constructed as they're standing today. So then there's two other primary considerations. If you could continue to scroll, thank you. So the proposed ordinance introduces, well, actually in our existing ordinance, and this would be continue into the proposed ordinance as it's written, there's a 40-foot site triangle. As you can see, the larger red dashed triangle that's at the front of the lot, wherein nothing above 2 feet is supposed to be installed except for, I think it uses the phrase, a reasonable number of trees that have a deciduous tree, not a
That's defendable, right?
evergreen is what I think has been interpreted. But the point is that we need to keep that area free for vision for automobiles that are rounding the corner or getting ready to turn, so that they can see oncoming pedestrians and other automobiles. And then the currently proposed ordinance includes an addition of a second site triangle that's smaller at the rear of the home for a similar but not exactly the same purpose as Annette's outlining with the mouse right now. So that 10-foot site triangle, the purpose of that is for the safety of anyone who's...
There's a laser pointer.
Thanks.
There was a laser pointer.
So there's not, okay, so this is the 10-foot area right here. Currently, there's not a provision for a 10-foot site triangle. The proposed ordinance says that if the driveway on the lot to the rear of the corner lot has a driveway within 10 feet that's existing, within 10 feet of the rear property line, then there would need to be a 10-foot site triangle on the corner lot. If it's greater than that 10 feet, then the site triangle would not be required. Let's see if I've missed anything on that. And then that's for existing driveways. For newly constructed driveways, what we said is that they can be no less than 10 feet. So that site triangle wouldn't be a requirement for any of them, because they wouldn't be allowed to be within 10 feet from the rear property line, 10 feet back from the property line of the interior lot that's adjacent to the corner lot. So they'd have to go 10 feet back straight, and then for like RVs or additional vehicles, they could jog the driveway over to the side of the house and park it on the side. So that would allow access for that purpose. I think I've covered most of so what's allowed under the proposed ordinance is that they're allowed a 3.5-foot solid fence in the side yard, but they're given an additional option of a 6-foot see-through fence, basically under any circumstance. Sorry, I don't know if I said solid or see-through, but I meant to say see-through. What they're not allowed to do under this ordinance is have any option at present for a solid fence. That was the balance that the Planning Commission felt like struck a balance between the two main issues on this subject of privacy and property rights for the corner lot owners and safety of the children and other vehicles that are both on the street and on the sidewalk and backing out of driveways. Let's see, I think the field trips have been pretty informative. One main insight is that there are many fences that don't comply with our current ordinance and are solid 6-foot fences. And I guess if anyone else wants to weigh in on additional insights that they've found from the field trip that they went on and share their thoughts. Another option that we viewed on the field trip was allowing a solid 6-foot fence, but requiring it that it stay a certain distance back from the sidewalk or property line of, say, 8 or 10 feet, maybe it's 5. You know, obviously you'll determine if that's an option you want to pursue. But, and if you don't have a handout on this subject, I have extra copies, so I'm happy to provide one of those to you. Pass that down to the mayor. So, any thoughts or? Yes. Questions?
And this is just open discussion, you don't need a lot of formality to be recognized.
Actually, I think I have one from our field trip a couple of weeks ago.
So one thing we talked about on the field trip this time was a little bit about, possible doing a land use permit that allows the city to review it, but that we'd have to probably define what, well, pardon me?
What they review.
Yeah, what they review and stuff, and then, one of my concerns is, you know, they have a 1-foot buffer on the sidewalk and, like at my house, I know that, the cable company has ran cable, and then it's actually a couple feet behind the sidewalk. And, only because, the only reason I know that is because I hit it, and when I was, digging a pit for my tramp. And, it was on Memorial Day weekend, and nobody watches TV then anyway. So, anyway, they, you know, and if we don't require the homeowners to, do something, they may not call blue stake, well, at least if the city's reviewing it, that we can remind them, say, you need to call blue stake, and if you hit that, then it's not on them. You know, I mean, just some concern there. And I'm not opposed to a 6-foot, solid fence, as long as we have the sight lines. I think I kind of, Phil and I talked about that, and that's what I told Phil, that's how I felt, I didn't see as long as there was a sight line. I like the idea of the sight line versus the 50%.
So part of
some
the,
my thoughts.
in discussion with the planning commission, just so everybody's aware of what came to the 50%, was almost more of the adjoining house, not, that's next to the corner lot, so they don't feel like they've got a wall all the way through their front yard out to the street. And that was brought up, one of the commissioners had lived in a house like that, and they felt like they had this big wall all the way out to the street next to their,
And
you know,
Rob
in their
did-
front yard.
Well, Rob did bring that up with me as we were driving.
And so
around.
that's, I think, partly where we came up with, you know, for the consideration of that neighbor of, okay, maybe there's some reasoning to have some partially see-through fence, just, you know, not to spy on the neighbors, not to do anything, but more just to help with the feel of openness, not,
Is your living room window right here would just be basically up to a
yeah,
fence,
a
right?
wall, all the way out to the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And so,
Mayor, one other thought, and that is that in the subdivision approvals that we're doing, the public utility easement is basically 10 feet back from that 1-foot line. So if anybody does build a fence there, and if the utilities have to do some work and what have you, then they're in jeopardy a little bit, potentially.
They would be subject to call blue stake on their own, right? I mean, in theory, right?
In theory, they should.
needed to make a repair in there, then is the homeowner,
no, the utility company has to take it out, put it back how it was.
If they're,
Like if they had to take a backhoe in your yard and you had a fence there, then they would take the fence out, do the repair, and put the fence back
so
up.
we don't have to
The
provide.
homeowner isn't responsible for
Okay.
that.
I was thinking the same way you were.
But there is some rationale to that 10 feet. I think that's the point.
The only challenge I see with the 10 feet is some of the smaller lots, you get them 8,000 square foot lots or 10,000 square foot lots, their side yards aren't very big. And if you go 10 feet, it becomes a moot point, you know. So close, it doesn't benefit you any.
Halfway to the house.
Yeah, you know.
20-foot setback.
Do we have a zoning that allows for a property less than 8,000 square feet?
Only under a planned unit development. And we do have some, we have some PRUDs. I think the smallest one is
Legacy.
about like 3,000 feet on Reliance. Is it Reliance?
I
The
don't,
one we're still waiting for the signature on?
yeah, I don't know what it is there, but.
Those lots
there's
are
like
about-
4,500 square foot lots around
Yeah.
some of the PRUDs.
But we're not considering those situations. We're talking about 8,000 square foot and larger lots.
Single residential, I think, right? Well, I guess duplexes would work too, right?
I think it's anywhere we put, somebody's gonna put a fence on the corner.
Right now, it doesn't specify specific to single-family homes on 8,000 square foot lots or larger. It just says in any situation, I believe it may reference residential, but I mean, technically, it would apply to a PRUD at this point in time, so we may need to specify that if you want to standard.
Oh, you say this proposed will apply to a PRUD?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, we need to think about that, and then the big one to think about is all of the homes out there that are non-compliant.
This gets them closer to compliant than what is currently, so, I mean, I guess we're not creating something that makes the situation worse. Cause correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon, but as is now, a 6-foot fence isn't allowed at all on the side yard. And so all those ones that we saw,
See, that was kind of, I don't think we had a complete understanding of that. Because there are cases, if the driveway on the back of the lot is not adjacent, you can have a 6-foot fence. The way I understood it when we were going through all this is no 6-foot fence a 6-foot fence was not allowed under any circumstance, but, I think we were misunderstanding this ordinance, right? I wish we could put drawings in these ordinances.
Well, if we can't understand it, how we
Well,
expect
we
anybody else to?
can, I mean, a drawing like
John,
this
how's
would
that
be
feel?
appropriate.
We need to do that, because as much as we beat it up, I don't think we understood it.
so then, it kinda boils down to the simple solution of, we wanna allow it to be a solid fence, and as it relates to the neighboring property, do you think that the 10-foot site triangle is critical there?
Well, I think the
And-
neighboring property that you bring up is important. We would not allow a normal house on a street to put a fence all the way to the road because it obstructs your neighbor's view. So that needs to be taken into consideration. Just because it's a corner lot, that neighbor still should not be boxed in. You gotta look at both sides.
What I liked, as we were going around, there were some issues with the opacity that we talked about, that you get to a certain angle, you lose the opacity. Going through, from one fence through the other, it's virtually, you got a 50 and a 50, and you're trying to see through both fences, you're almost 100% opaque anyway. I like the setback, having a 5 or an 8-foot setback. The homes that we looked at towards the end there, that had the 6-foot fence, next to a house, I didn't get a sense that I would have felt boxed in if I were the home next to that side yard, because of that landscape setback, the 5-foot setback. Yeah, there's some of them were 10, some of them were closer, it looked like to 8. I'd be comfortable with say a 5-foot setback. I think that, at least in my mind, right now, it balances the needs of the individual who's wanting to use as much of their yard as they can with the needs of the neighbor to not feel boxed in, and also increase that sightline visibility for safety purposes for the sidewalk.
Something else that encourages too is to maintain that strip, where if there's only 1 foot,
Exactly.
I think oftentimes people don't maintain that, and it's kind of run down.
John, on the point that Lynn brought up of the grandfather, the other houses, is there any way you could write something in the ordinance to where, and I don't know how this may be a total nightmare on how you'd manage this, but if the fence has been up for 5 years or more, maybe we don't have to make him change it, I don't know.
Well, it's,
I don't know if that's a good idea, that may be the stupidest idea in the world.
no, it's just, it's, the fence is a complicated issue because we don't issue building permits for it. So we don't have any record of when the fence went up, specifically when the houses have changed hands. So it's hard to really look at a fence and decide what ordinance it falls under. Cause if it came in under an iteration that was 2 ordinances ago, then how do you know what, I mean, it's just too hard to try and pinpoint it. So something like that that says anything that's been there for 5 years or more is actually easier. Because then all we have to do is, someone just has to prove, you know what, this fence was here when I bought it, and I bought the house 6 years ago. I mean, that makes it easier from an enforcement standpoint to just say, okay, they're grandfathered in. So that type of provision is much easier for the staff to deal with, than anything else. And that would also, I mean, if I remember right, our fence ordinance has been in place for 8 years, 10 years, something like that.
I am not actually sure.
So, you know, so we would know every fence that had been in there, you know, and that's in the city now, it was at least under the existing ordinance or the new ordinance. And then the biggest risk you have is that staff has to stay on top of it because you're gonna, every fence that from this point on that's there for 5 years now gets grandfathered in. So if you don't catch it in 5 years, then it's grandfathered in. So it's kind of this, just kind of have to dance around the language a little. Although I guess we could put a provision that says that any fence that was erected before November 1st, 2012 is grandfathered in or something like that.
And this is part of a larger discussion for especially the council. What are your feelings on enforcement of fence regulation? Because we need to know that, because there are some that may not be that big a deal, they're just violating the ordinance, and there are some that are all the way to the street and they have a driveway right next door. It's a big enough problem, we need to enforce that, I would think. If it's not that big of a problem, why are we making the law-abiding people have to jump through these hoops who do take the time to check? If we're just gonna turn a blind eye, there's brand new houses in Mystery Meadows that are doing fences all the way to the road. Well, you probably saw them on the field trip. So that's something we as the administration would like some guidance from the council on. How big of an enforcement priority is this for you? Brand new house, clearly violated the ordinance, and it is a genuine safety concern. I have a hard time with, if we're not gonna enforce that other people have to follow it.
No, I think there ought to be a period of time, as Carl suggested, that if we go back, I don't know what that period is, whether it's 4 years or 5 years, or to the point at which our existing fence ordinance came into play. But I think Mayor, you bring up a good point. Why have the law if we're not going to be enforcing it? Why have the ordinance? So, 4 or 5 years, I don't know, what do you guys think? Back to the point at which the current ordinance took effect, because that's the ordinance they should have been working under.
I think if the existing fence ordinance only been in for 8 years, you just backdate it to that point on, and then you're not, because anybody that put their fence up before that didn't have any regulation, and so you're capturing a small window if you say 5 years and the ordinance has only really been 8.
Right.
You just as well go back to the original,
To the beginning of the
and then say,
ordinance.
well, there's a good break. Here's when the fence ordinance started, and you're gonna have a difficult time probably proving when that takes place in that window. But at least the real obvious, really old fences that are more than 8 years old, or the homes, they were before a fence regulation, and you have a hard time going back and slapping their hands.
Right.
But at the same time, I think you put something in there that says, in the event of, just like most things, in the event of a repair or replacement, it needs to come into conformity.
Right.
So we get another North Ogden hurricane, some fences might move at that point,
Right.
into regulation. But
So what I'm gathering then is that we would be asking them to come into compliance with the new ordinance, or in compliance to the ordinance that they would have been under when they constructed the fence,
If
if they're out of compliance
Well,
now.
the new one will likely be less restrictive, so
Right.
we would probably say,
To the new
The new
ordinance,
one.
right.
yeah.
You were out of compliance with the old one, we're telling you to come into compliance with the new ordinance, 5-foot setback or whatever it happens to be.
In the ordinance, it says adopted 4/9/2002.
So 14 years ago.
I know you can go back and look at old, Google Earth publishes. I know they go by year, I know insurance companies will go back, if somebody makes a claim on their roof or whatever it is, they'll go back and they can pull up previous versions of Google Earth, so I know you can do that, you can go back and see when something was erected.
Okay.
We have aerial photography as well, that the county flies somewhat regularly. I don't know what the closest one was to that date, but pretty easy to find it.
Fences are a little hard, but the photography might be better than the Google Earth images, because they're always looking straight down, so sometimes you can't pick them out.
I think going back to the old stuff is really trying to figure out the whole reason of what we're trying to create here for the ordinance, and if safety is the concern, and you say we want that site triangle next to the driveway, if that's the reason, then it doesn't really matter when they put their fence up. We go and ask them, hey, a kid's walking down the sidewalk and your neighbor pulls out of their driveway and runs over them because your fence is right here. Our new ordinance addresses this. If that's the reason, then I look at it and say, I don't know that you make a special clause for anybody, if that's the whole purpose of this, but I don't know how you address that.
Well, yeah,
You know,
for on our side, we've got to break it down to a practical level where there's a few people in Mystery Meadow, we've told them, you need to stop your fence, but they can literally point right down the street, my neighbor did this exact thing within the past years or two. So is that neighbor going to have to move that fence is really a question. By the end of the night, I hope we can get some guidance, especially from council, because this is a council thing. We are absolutely ready to do that, but we got to know that's the council's feeling, that the council supports that. Another question is, so enforcement we need some guidance on, separate from the planning commission discussion. Whatever comes out of this, we need to know what's the council's feeling on enforcement of existing homes we know absolutely put fences in violation of this ordinance, because it's very new neighborhoods.
Of the existing.
Right, of the existing or whatever subsequent one you put. Another question I'd like the council to kind of be thinking about is, well, of course, where we're gonna go from here. Oh, shoot, there's one more I was thinking of.
Well, I was thinking, consider that it's not a fence at all, and somebody's put up some landscaping that makes the site triangle, it's gone away, and so we've got a safety consideration, we go right after that.
And I think in
matter
here it
when
even
the-
talks about no fence, hedge, or similar structure on corner lots, so it talks a little bit about it.
There was a railroad type fence being built up 3100 and 450 East that was in the site triangle, for example. We had the homeowner take down. So one preliminary question would be thoughts on a land use permit or some kind of process to hopefully reduce this problem in the future. Because nothing's worse than a homeowner who thinks they're doing something right. Maybe they did not know they need to talk to the city. Maybe they didn't care. We don't know what the motives was, but they did something that's fairly expensive and it was not in compliance. Now comes the big enforcement question. If we can avoid that by having a clear process that we educate our citizens about regularly in the newsletter, you need to get a permit for your fence, something like that, we can avoid this kind of costly problem. So we need some thoughts on that, on a permitting process for land use items such as a fence, thoughts on enforcement of problems we know definitely are in violation of the ordinance, and then, of course, where you want the ordinance to go from here as well.
I was just thinking, I'm gonna Jim isn't here, so I'll take his side of it on. It would be easier to put a list of things you could do without talking to the city. Because right now, we have regulations for just about everything anybody would ever think of doing anywhere in their yard. And I'm starting to wonder if we're kind of just overthinking some of this stuff. As we drove around, I was looking at it, and I was probably one of the biggest proponents for the 50% see-through. And then you start looking around, and it's like, you know, if these were that bad, we'd have people dying all over the place. We'd be getting kids squashed, you know, and one is inexcusable if we can prevent it. But at the same time, is this a problem?
Trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I start wondering about that. Are we just getting so OCD and wrapped around the axle that we're just trying to regulate everything that everybody does? Every time I go out and plant a tomato plant, I'm starting to wonder if I feel like a rebel. Because I haven't got approval from the
How many
city.
feet is it from your neighbor?
And how many did you give your neighbor?
Yeah, that's right, or throw at them.
There's a difference.
Well, and if you're close to a city park and they came and sprayed for weeds, then if you got your tomato plant too close, then that's happened
Speaking
all
from
the way-
experience.
all the way around our place.
So I appreciate your comment, and I don't disagree with you. In fact, I think Lynn has been very vocal about the same, are we getting too regulated on things and stuff? My thought on the land use permit is I think that would solve some of these issues for people. Even, we still have to have an ordinance and stuff, but if we had a land use permit, then people would come in and say, hey, I wanna put a fence up, and they look at it and say, yes, you can do it this way, or, and then you can just solve some problems. I don't think it's necessarily regulating people, but just allowing them, giving them information on what they can and what they, what they can do and what type of fence they can put up, and, so I'm in favor of land use permit. And I understand what you're saying. I kinda feel the same way, except I still think people, like these folks who came in, they said, oh, we didn't need a permit for that, and then they started putting it up in the wrong place, cause they didn't know, the regulations, so. I personally think trying to find the regulations online is terrible, personally. I think that's a hard way to find them and stuff, but I'm not as computer savvy as Lynn is.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I feel, not, because I agree with what you're saying, and I would be fine if we said no land use permit if we had no ordinance, because then there's no problems. Where I see the permit becoming necessary is if we do have an ordinance and a large number of people are violating it and it's an expensive fix, we're putting now in this catch-22 of either we throw the ordinance to the wind because there's so many people that have violated it, or we hold the people who do take the time to look at it to a higher standard than their neighbor who just blazed ahead with whatever they wanted.
Right, punish them.
And that's where we either need to not have the ordinance if it's not important and we don't need the permit, or if it is important, we need to have it. And I would suggest we have the permitting process not as an onerous thing, but as a, ladies and gentlemen, we wanna make sure we check this so you don't run into a
costly fix.
$1,000 move of your fence,
And that's my thought too.
down the road. So, I can see it both ways. It just.
Well, it seems like the land use permitting process would be more of an informational thing than a regulatory thing, because we're really using it as a means to make sure that the right information is given to somebody who's wanting to do something that is permitted within our city under certain circumstances. The regulation's already there. The permit just helps them get to that point, or helps assure that most of them, because there'll still be some who just blaze ahead and do what they want anyway.
Will there be a record that they've contacted, and if we were to go that way? The reason I ask is because, as well as I do, the regulations are constantly changing.
I would think there'd have to be a record
That they had
That's
been
the sound for the
they had approached the
They
city.
had approached the city and gotten.
According to the best information they had, they were in compliance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think in that way, it's a protection for the landowner who's wanting to do something, that they can go back to this record and say, we wanted to put the fence up, we went to the city under a land use permit.
That would be.
They said, check, you're
It is
good
a
with what you
protection.
want to do.
And that would give them an incentive or a reason to do it.
Because right now, they could say, well, I called the city, and they told me they didn't need a permit, very legitimately, so they told me this and this and this was okay, but then it's a he said, she said, cause I promise you that'll come up if we enforce these fences, well, they told me I didn't need a permit. So, it's like, it just clarifies it for everyone involved, there's a documentation of what was said, what the determination was, and so I'm not trying to 100% sway it, but I think there's a lot of reasons it could avoid a lot of problems for the city and the citizen down the road.
I'd like to hear Rob and Brendan, they're the guys who are gonna have to kind of review these, what they think of it.
Well, before we get there, while we're still have this land use permit thing on the table, it doesn't alleviate, we don't, it doesn't take away the need for us to write down what the ordinance is, right?
Right.
What it does is make it easier, you don't have to be so formal as a building permit. And if we make it simple enough, straightforward enough that it's easily interpretable and you can communicate that through, and to the people who come in for a land use permit, then it simplifies things and makes it less permitting, that kind of thing, right?
Our goal, whenever we write an ordinance, is we use the legal standard of clear and objective. And what that really means to me is that the average person, when they read that, they can understand it. And I became well acquainted with land use permit system when I worked with Weber County, and it seemed to work extremely well. They charged a very minimal fee, I don't remember what it was, $25, $10, some very minimal amount, but at least covered a little bit of the cost of actually taking the time to review what the application request was, and then being able to transmit that into some type of a system so that it is a part of the record of that particular property. So, and frankly, it's very similar to what we do now with building permits. If you look at our building permit down in the lower right-hand corner, it says zoning check or something like that. And there's a little box there, and either Brandon or myself, we fill that out when we get an application for a building permit. We check the zone, we identify the setbacks and so forth, include those in there, and then as Gary reviews it, we make sure that those ordinances are complied with. And it works really well.
Well, so I like the idea of the land use permit because it makes it easier to do, it makes it less expensive, and it documents that they actually, what they did and when. As long as it doesn't take an attorney to be in your office to explain to them. I mean,
Would the requirement be for every fence, or would it just be for corner lot fence? Because that would seriously impact the workload that would be required.
There is another, we're talking about corner lots right now.
Right.
But there's also the whole fence height is gonna be coming to, both the, planning commission for, what's a 6-foot fence? How do you measure all of that stuff? Because neighbors across the street have been having wars over that, and they come to me and I didn't know what it was either, so. Anyway, I know that one's gonna be coming too, so fences and fences and fences, we're gonna have more of them.
Well, I think the land use permit would be, if you start saying corner fence or lot, I think it'd have to be just fences.
For every fence?
Yeah, that's, but you could make a land use permit for sheds under 200 square feet if we wanted to, do something like that, to where they had to get something like that, because right now, is it 200 feet above or above?
Sheds is one of those same things, where it's one of those, well, I talked to so-and-so, he said we can build it here. There's no permit process. It protects everyone. If there's, I know regulation is not like our top thing to do, but it genuinely protects everyone involved when there's a document that sits at City Hall for the next 50 years that says this shed, fence, pad was reviewed and met our ordinances, and it's signed by the building official. So I would be in favor of it in more places than, the ones that really make sense and that we've had all these issues with coming up later, and someone having to, in cases, move very expensive work that they've done at their house because it's not in ordinance.
Well, I think we would feel more comfortable to go back and have them fix it if they didn't get a permit when that was required. You know, where if there was no permitting process, like now, it's sort of, well, you know. But if they were actually required to have that permit and didn't get it, then you don't feel so bad about requiring them to bring it back into compliance at their own expense.
Well, I think too, if as a legislative body, we're concerned about something to the point where we're willing to pass an ordinance, there ought to be a mechanism that we have in place to ensure that the ordinance is being followed, not only to protect the homeowners, but to protect the city. I mean, there was a reason that somebody, somewhere, put this ordinance in place. There was an issue that somebody felt needed to be addressed, and if it's been addressed, a simple land use permit, inexpensive, $10, something like that, that it's just a process of coming through and saying, okay, yeah, you're good, go check mark, 50 years of records, you're good, nobody can question it from this point forward. It just seems to make sense to me. So I'm in favor of it as well.
And it would need to roll out to sheds and just about anything like that.
I think anything that we've taken the time to pass an ordinance on.
Yeah, and anything that's gonna be semi-permanent. Honestly, curbside trees need to be in there too, because some work and some don't. And there's ordinances for that too. And so, yeah, it becomes a real long list of things that need to get, that require this land use permit before they do it. And it's gotta be cheap enough that people aren't going to freak out, the $10, $15, if we go, I really think we go over $20, I don't think anybody will do it again.
And I think it has a secondary effect if we do this too, that there'll probably be some discussions, what really needs to be a land use permit.
We may end up
ordinance.
eliminating
If some things are really not that important, if they're not important enough to maybe permit, maybe we don't need those ordinances. I mean, that's probably a good opportunity to take this list and screen through it and say, what of this is genuinely needed in our ordinances and what do we feel like is not important enough to enforce? Because we probably don't need it then, if it's not important enough. So that might just help us reduce some regulations that are not really being followed and aren't really rising to the importance of enforcing.
So we have an idea of how to enforce it. Now,
What do we want? Yeah, so land use permit, Rob and Brandon, do you feel you have enough to start working on that, a proposal for that? So, yeah.
Trying to keep things moving.
Well, to Eric's question, when I iterated earlier, what was that?
Spit it out.
Stop it. You're on camera.
Yeah, we just zoomed in, by the way.
I'm in favor of a 5-foot setback, allowing a 6-foot solid. It seems to me it takes care of the landscaping issue and the maintenance issue, it takes care of the safety issue, and it takes care of boxing in your neighbor issue, and it gives the landowner more of their yard that they paid for to use for their kids. So a 5-foot setback, 6-foot solid is fine, as far as I'm concerned. If I were king for the day.
Okay, so we got
Never
one
happened, but
way
from the
forward here,
side.
other
5
thoughts?
foot from the property line, so
Okay.
that would be
That's a
6
foot,
feet back
6
from
feet
the
from the
sidewalk,
sidewalk.
so 5 foot from the property line, so that we have that, cause you have
So
that.
you're talking about a 5-foot triangle as opposed to a 10-foot triangle.
Well,
Oh, I think the triangle would still be there, right?
Right.
You're talking the lateral,
Yeah, right,
On the
right,
side.
yeah, we'd
On
still
the
want that 10-foot
fence
side
parallel
triangle
to the street.
distance between the sidewalk.
to make sure it's
Side
right at the
triangle.
corner,
Oh,
we want
I
a
see what
side
you're saying.
triangle.
and then
Coming
when you
back.
pull
But
this
not
back
letting the
up,
fence
it's
come all the way to that 1
The
foot from
planning
the
commission.
sidewalk, so it has to
Got
be
it.
back 5 feet. We still have that angled piece, so that we have that 10-foot sight triangle. I don't see where that would, I don't know, it just seems to be a good middle point between all of the concerns that we have from homeowners, fence builders, safety for the kids and people walking on the sidewalks and all those kinds of things.
Annette, please go to the next page up, planning commission recommendations. So
You think 5 feet is enough?
I think so, yeah.
You're saying this as is, except a solid fence option if this is moved back 6 feet.
Actually, go to
essentially
the
from
next
sidewalk.
page under additional options. 3 pages down, keep going.
Okay.
that one right there, if we did, that one right there at a 5-foot setback, except in the corner in the right, that we would still have a 10-foot side
10
triangle.
From the neighbor's house.
Mhm.
Okay, I like that.
If the driveway is there.
If the driveway's there, right, if the driveway is adjacent, in other words, on the side of the home closest
If
to
it's
the
within 10
rear
feet of the
property line,
property.
if it's within the 10 feet, then we've gotta have that 10-foot side triangle.
What
For safety
about though
purposes.
if the driveway's not there, but somebody's front window is? We still give them that 10 feet for their
We're
visibility?
thinking safety mostly, I think.
Well, we wouldn't if somebody planted a tree there and it blocked their same view from the window. You know, if I put a maple tree or something there and I only trim it up 4 or 5 feet off the ground, that neighbor has no view, in fact, less of a view once that maple grows out than if they have a 6-foot fence standing there, so.
The definition of fence does include hedges, not trees.
Not trees.
But it does include hedges.
But not trees. And somebody, you know, so
What I'm saying
somebody's.
is if somebody just plants a hedge along there, those same height restrictions apply.
Right, right.
I agree, I think if you tackle this as a safety, more of a safety concern than aesthetic concern, like you said, if we're trying to protect somebody's view or protect somebody's feel from their window, then you said a tree would essentially do the same thing as a fence.
A tree or an addition, I mean, at that in the neighborhood too, where somebody built it on another story on their house.
So if it's a safety thing, then I say you just, well, let them use their whole yard and go to the side, go to the property line with the fence
Oh,
and keep the side
absolutely not.
triangle. Well, but I'm just saying if it's a safety thing,
Well,
that
would
same
even
would
make
be
it still a
advised.
safety issue.
Why? If they maintain the side triangle on the corners, and then the people can use their whole yard.
Well, I think the
So-
idea of the setback is so you could see someone down the fence line, right?
Yeah, it does increase more than just that 10-foot site triangle, it does increase it, but more than that, I think you're more apt, as was discussed on the field trip, to get people who are maintaining that 5-foot piece than somebody who may be apt to just let that 1-foot strip turn into weeds or whatever, because, hey, it's not my property anyway. Where most people are probably not gonna let that 5-foot strip go. They'll plant grass there, it'll look decent, hopefully they'll edge it or maybe put flowers or something. That was my thinking for that.
There's another justification for that too. We require 5-foot sidewalks, is that right, 5 foot? 4 foot? Okay, so if the fence is right up against the sidewalk, that sidewalk is effectively a 2-foot sidewalk, because people won't walk and rub their shoulders on the fence. They wanna be away from the fence. And so setting the fence back away from the sidewalk does improve the walkability of the city, the usability of the sidewalks. And so, I mean, that is justification to say, you know, you've gotta have it back away from the
It does
fence
give
has
a
to
more
be away.
open feel without the
It
sidewalk
does.
actually having to be larger. It does give a more open feel, so, I don't know, those are my thoughts.
How about if the driveway behind is not adjacent? Does it change the requirement for the site triangle or anything else?
I think the side triangle goes away at that point, as it does now.
Just a question.
The safety issue is
Probably
gone.
should address.
And then you still require the,
The 5-foot
fence
set-
setback,
yeah, the 5-foot
regardless of where
setback.
the driveway is.
Right.
Instead of, you said 5 feet becomes 6 feet because of that 1 foot. Could we say make it 5 feet exactly, and do a 4 foot, so you have essentially,
So you have
you have 5 feet.
that would be fine with me, yeah.
Is 3 feet all right?
No.
3'8".
I think we're going in
What
the
are we
wrong
gonna get
direction,
here?
personally.
I don't think you should decrease it any.
Yeah, I think 5 is
I
even
don't-
pushing it.
Yeah, 5 is not that, that's only the width of the sidewalk,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
and
not
that's
very
not
wide.
that far.
No, no.
But you're saying 6 feet though, it's,
Yeah.
so you have to measure 6 feet, why not make it an equal 5, is what I'm saying.
And then I say, why not make it 4, so. It's just,
But if your house is 30 feet away from the sidewalk, then you go 10 feet. I'm just kidding.
I know a mathematician that could come up with an algorithm for us.
And so would there be any discussion about solid versus see-through 50%? would we even care at that point?
I don't care, cause I think there
I
are
don't
too
think so,
many
'cause
issues
there's-
from
They've got
being able to
that.
see through the two, that you basically have an opaque fence anyway, even if you have, 50% on here and 50% there trying to see through, you can't see through anything. I think we just leave it, you can go solid, 6 foot, the 5 foot 4 foot setback, whatever we decide, 4 or 5.
5.
Okay, 5, we'll go with 5, cause Cheryl's adamant, and she's the
I
one that
am.
has the most experience with unsafe drivers. So a 5 foot setback, which means 6 feet from the sidewalk. And if it's a driveway, inside that 10 feet, then you have to have a 10-foot sight triangle. I think it makes it, I don't know, pretty simple to me.
And it gives you the privacy situation that you'd like, I mean, we take away some of the property, owner's property, because we're gonna make them go back from the sidewalk a little further. But by requiring site triangles, then it can be,
Privacy fence?
yeah, they can do anything they want in the backyard.
And anything they want to the neighbor's front yard.
And I'm not trying to throw a wrench in a
Yes,
great
you are.
discussion, but, so homeowners who are not on a corner lot, can they do a fence 5 feet if they don't have a driveway next to them? 5 feet from a 6 foot fence in front of their house.
So it'll only be corner lots that will be close to a fence, of course, to a.
Right, I know this is only for corner lots, but I guess I'm just asking what's the justification for not? They don't have a driveway next door.
So
Because
they
we
can-
don't allow a 6 foot fence to go
In the front yard.
past the front of the house.
Exactly.
Right.
So your next door neighbor who's a corner lot is gonna have a fence all the way to the 5 feet from the sidewalk, 6 feet from the sidewalk, but yours cannot be, even though maybe there's not a driveway next to it. Why? I'm just, it's just a question.
I think the technical answer is because theirs is in their backyard, side yard, not the front yard. That make sense? Your neighbor's got the 6 foot fence because it's in their backyard.
But that's also the front yard of the house next door.
Well, it is once you step across the property line. But
So
as
we
long as
should
I'm
make
in
them
my
put it 1
property
foot
line,
in?
then it's my backyard. What's that?
So they should put a 1 foot in on their backyard from the property line,
5 feet.
so it's in their backyard.
No, I get where you're coming from, but at the same time, I mean,
Well, you have to go back, what was the reason the fence stopped at the back of the house before in the ordinance? And I think that's the reason, was so we didn't have 6 foot fences in people's front
Public
yards.
streets. That was
And
the
all the
idea.
way on the side of
So
somebody's house.
now we're saying, hey, we don't mind, the guys that live on the corner, we wanna let them use their full yard, so we don't mind having a 6 foot fence in their neighbor's front yard. I mean, I'm assuming that's why the ordinance before stopped it there. If you look at the existing ordinance, will you go over to the first page in that? Up a few. Just to kind of get a history of where we're coming from to change and why, right there. Shows the 6 foot that's allowed up to the back of the corner lot's house, over, that way it doesn't show the 6 foot fence, but that dotted and dashed line there would be 6 feet up to the matching 6 foot line, and they would have to drop to 3.5 feet. So what we're saying is, let's do away with that and allow it to go 6 feet all the way out.
As long as.
I don't really
Yeah,
see
I-
that as being the front yard though. That's your lateral property boundary. It's not really a front yard. I mean, it's off to the side. but
I
it's-
know, that's what I'm saying. I think the mayor's just,
Oh,
for
I think
sake of
devil's
thinking about it,
advocate, yeah.
if your neighbor put a fence up all the way to the sidewalk on the east of you, would we allow that? And why not, if we are allowing it here?
You mean in between, like on the side property line?
Mm-hmm.
I see. I thought you were talking along the frontage.
No.
No, on
Yeah,
the side.
So the guy over there in the house on the right.
Yeah, he decided he
He's-
wanted to run that fence
He's
all the
got,
way.
he's got, well, we go down to view number 2. You scroll up, yeah, okay. Now he decides he likes being hidden from the street a little bit, and he wants to run a fence
So he goes and puts a
on
fence
the
over
right
here.
side there to match the one on the other side. Could he do that?
Down a corner lot.
So we don't wanna
That's a
take
good-
away a
that's a good
property
question.
owner's right to fence in his property.
I don't.
You know, sometimes you give a right to one property owner, you're taking away something from the next, and that's what's, I'm assuming, you know, we talked about this in planning commission. You know, why was the ordinance drafted the way it was originally? Why was it to 3.5 feet? And through that process, that's, I think, where we came up with that 50%. And I'm not for or against the 50%, but that's less intrusive to the neighbor next door if this fence here is somewhat see-through rather than a solid wall in his front yard.
So it's,
That was probably more the reason of the 50%, not
Right.
anything to do with
The safety
seeing
piece,
through,
yeah.
because if you require the site triangle, that solved the safety thing. It was more, this guy who lives here doesn't have a solid wall in front of his house, in his front yard. Now, he may prefer that, so he doesn't see what's going on in the neighbor's backyard, but,
indeed some do,
yeah,
Yeah.
would rather.
so, I don't,
And like I say,
You know.
they might want, and again, if you've got a non-permitted with, the guy living in that house say, hey, that's kinda cool, I like having that fence all the way to the sidewalk, and he puts a fence down the other side
Well,
of
it
his
would be a
yard.
5-foot setback.
Okay, well, yeah,
6 feet
if that's
would
what we
be
did.
from the sidewalk.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
And I don't know that I'd have a problem with that.
So a little bit of the rationale here is that if you're an interior lot, you have some kind of a side yard setback on either side, usually around 10 feet. So part of the argument is, don't let me hit you in the eye, Mayor, that on this side yard, on this side, he's probably got 10 feet as well. This side, he has a minimum of 20, but if you're gonna do apples to apples, 10 here, 10 here, then maybe that should only be out 10 there.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So that
Fairness.
So
way,
you keep a consistent
you
setback.
get somewhat of a consistent setback as far as the ability of someone to be able to fence in their yard. When you do this, they're actually providing for additional area for that particular homeowner. So
So the
from a
setback instead
rationale
of 5
standpoint,
feet from the property line would be 10 feet from the house.
so it'd be 10 feet coming this direction here, or
Right.
10 feet back, either one.
Right.
And then that sort of gets a little bit at this issue of,
Well, that automatically gives you that 10-foot site triangle too.
It would probably be better to write it, just strategically so that it's 10 feet back from the property line as opposed to measured from the house,
I agree.
in case you have larger lots where you have a 30-foot setback, side setback.
I totally agree with that, Colin.
So now-
Or you have smaller lots where that 10 feet
Yeah,
takes
we-
you
we-
almost out to the curb.
and we discussed
Yeah.
that in the
Yeah.
planning commission. And decided most of the lots that do have 20 there, even though this is a side, with the corner lot, you end up with usually less backyard. But it's also, you put a fence down the middle, essentially, of your side yard. And so then, neither side is really the advantageous to use, you know, a trampoline or whatever on the side. It doesn't fit, so, you know, that's where, then you say, okay, let's push it out further. And then, you know, it becomes usable,
Well,
or
I'm
leave
back
it
to
the
my
way it
five-
is,
I'm
back
to
to.
my 5 feet. That's where I'm sitting at the
Plus
moment.
one.
Huh?
5 plus 1, right?
5 plus 1, yeah, total of 6, so 5 feet from the property line.
Steve's at 4 plus 1.
I got a 4, I got a 4, I got a 5. If you're 6, anybody 6.
Okay, other thoughts on this?
And frankly, if the guy in the middle, on the right there, wanted to do the same thing down to that 5-foot setback, I can't imagine there's very many people that will do that, but I don't know that that would be an issue. He wants to box himself in like that. I mean, it was weird for me moving up here because everything in Arizona has 6-foot cinder block walls in the back. And to move here where you had virtually no fences and only a few here and there, it was a little getting used to being able to see into your
What do they do
neighbor's
on the
yard.
corners down there then?
Well, I'm trying to
lower
think of what was
windows.
right next to me.
In my neighborhood, I don't remember a lot of
And you
lots
go into
on
the mid-
corners like that.
And you go into the
Yeah.
Midwest where nobody has fences between yards.
Right. That's right.
And they think that any fence is weird.
The house 2 doors down from me was a corner lot, 1 door down from me, and their fence came within 3 feet of the sidewalk. So the neighbor, my
So we got a
neighbor, their
three. We got a
driveway
three.
was adjacent to that back wall, but that back wall came way out past the corner line, the parallel line of their house. It came out to within 3 or 4 feet of the sidewalk. And so as that neighbor was backing out, and then they had oleanders planted along there in front of the fence. So you basically had zero visibility all the way to the sidewalk line. And it was a cinder block wall and oleander, so.
Let me just,
Nobody died.
If they drink, if they eat the oleanders, they will.
No, you just get really sick.
it just, Phil, you said it was weird when you moved up here. It was weird for us when you moved up here too, but, and then just back to,
We got used to it.
Eric's comment earlier, and I know he was, trying to be the devil's advocate, but, being a 1 foot, and if we're maintaining the sight line, and I know Cheryl's vehemently against that, but I'm not against that. If you're 1 foot behind, and as far as maintaining, we have ordinance and regulations, they're supposed to maintain their yards and stuff and keep them to a certain standard. I don't see that being an issue. We're taking people's property because if we're maintaining the safety, then why should we require somebody to give up more property? And that's kind of what my thought there. The ones that were up here on 1050 that were landscaped, I thought they looked awesome. And I like that idea, landscaping wise, architecturally, and everything. I really like that look, but I don't know if it's fair to go to the homeowner and say, well, you gotta give up 5 feet because
Well,
we
this-
just,
well,
so that's just a
like
thought.
If the city's gonna tell me what I gotta do with the property, they can maintain it.
And we talk about a corner lots and how the guy in the middle, people who buy corner lots, some people like them better, but the guy who buys a corner lot technically has more sidewalk to shovel, in the winter. He has more edging he has to do. He has more park strip he has to mow and irrigate. That's part of the deal. So the guy in the middle, sorry, your fence can't be the same. You don't have as much.
They also have to come to council meetings.
Only the ones whose last name begin with W. I think that's in the ordinance, isn't it? So anyway, I just, so I'm not against a 5 foot, I'm just thinking.
Well, indeed, that's more property rights, centric.
Yeah, and
Go to the 1 foot, put the fence up.
the thing I think, now, we'd have to go measure, but I would bet those houses on 1050 that we thought looked good in that, probably were 30 feet away from this property line, their side yard. So they had quite a bit of backyard inside their fence as well. And so that's,
Fences
that,
are 30 feet?
no, the house.
Oh.
So
I see.
that changes how it all looks. And you say, oh, that's usable and that looks good, but
Because
you
they
take
had that
somebody
much
that's it's at 20 feet, and you say, well, now you're gonna put a fence right in the middle of it, and you think, well, God, we just,
This is about what, 7 feet across here, but you're
And
only
so-
gonna gain a little more than that. You're not gonna gain a whole lot in your side yard.
so, yeah, we've come full circle to no decision.
I appreciate Cheryl's input, and I'm still at 5 feet.
And I'm leaning more back to the 1 foot because it gives them property rights.
What's the purpose? What's the purpose in a fence ordinance? Safety, property rights, so somebody doesn't build razor wire
And
10
there,
feet tall.
aesthetics,
you
definitely
know,
aesthetics.
Aesthetics with the city. I mean, go back to the 2002 when that first was created. Why? Somebody built a compound with razor wire, and so the neighbors came in and said, hey, we need to regulate this? Well, I don't know why it was. I just, you ask that and say, well, now why are we addressing it now? Well, we're addressing it now because a family came in that was trying to do what's right and said, hey, I want my grandchild to play in the backyard, and I lose half my yard if I can't put a
Well,
6-foot fence
from the
up.
safety component of that family that came in, you've got the safety of the public, and you have the safety of the autistic child. So you have two competing safety concerns there. And how do you decide which of those two takes precedent? I don't know that you can.
Well, I would say the backyard is used more than the sidewalk.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
And then you look at and say, well, we're talking about a neighboring driveway. Obviously, the site triangle on a corner for the street reasons, but, so that's the question, is why, what's the ordinance for?
Safety has to be like number one. Number one. I mean, it's, if we let this go and just let things, just see what happens bad first, it'll be a safety issue that'll bring this group back together. It won't be an aesthetics issue, it won't be a lot of things, but safety. And I think there'll be a lot of people that, on firm ground, can ask for their property rights to put a fence where they want on their property, as long as they don't impede the safety of the residents.
So just a quick question, can you scroll up to the picture that's just above? Is there anyone who still feels like the 6-foot fence should come off the back corner of the house?
No.
So now we're just arguing about how close to the sidewalk it goes. And I just want to make sure that we're
not arguing. Come on.
Now we're just
That's what
discussing.
attorneys do. That's what attorneys do.
Okay. Well, it's nice to know that option's obviously off the table, and now we're talking about how close to the
John's
sidewalk
trying to
we
make
want
us seem like we made progress.
He switched the word argument for the word debate, because there really is
Debate.
always a debate.
Which is just part of the process.
So we still need to figure out,
1 foot, 5 feet.
well, yeah, we need, we need to figure that out so that we can ask the planning commission to come up with a.
So with the
ordinance.
1 footer, you're still keeping the 10-foot sight triangle at the corner if there's an adjacent
I
driveway?
think you have to have all the site triangles, yes. I think you have to maintain all the site triangles, be it 10 feet, be it 20 feet, as long as you have the site triangle. The 10 foot was determined how?
We referenced a number of different city ordinances, and 10 feet is the most common.
Okay, I think that has to be maintained, and then we also need to think about what Lynn brought up several times of the old fences and how we wanna address those. Still need to figure that out so that we can have a draft ordinance, something in there, right?
Well, and if you're at 1 foot, there's some fences that go to the sidewalk, and it's pretty easy to tell them, hey, your fence is on the city's property, you need to move it.
Yeah.
But it's also a lot easier to say, hey, this is the ordinance that we've adopted, and it's pretty easy, not pretty easy, sorry, it's never gonna be easy to enforce, but I think it would be easier going back to somebody with a fence and saying, all we're asking you to do is change the corner to a site triangle. And then in the situation where there's a neighbor that's got a driveway there.
Right.
Versus tear your whole fence out and move it 4 feet, or tear your whole fence out and move it 8 feet,
Or 1 foot.
If you're moving it 1
cut a
foot-
bunch of holes in it, so it's 50%.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But even moving it 1 foot would, I think that there's quite a big expense there.
There is, but at that instance, though, it's on city
It's safe.
property. It's not on their property. So that's regardless of what an ordinance was, they put the fence in the wrong
Yeah,
place.
they put it on city property, so that's an
Because
easy.
there's some that go literally to the side.
Yes.
Except I bought this house.
Unless the sidewalk is the property line.
I bought the house and the fence was there before. Well, it wasn't me that put it there.
They should have disclosed that it was on city property.
Well, the old former homeowner didn't, so now I gotta
Well,
spend
this is an
$500.
important discussion point, because for
Yeah.
our code enforcement officer, she needs some clear guidance from the city council on exactly the practicality of this. Once we've kind of settled on the ordinance,
Is the city willing to sell 1 foot strips to people? I mean, really, the fence isn't on the property line.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's, you see that all the time, whether it's been 50 years ago or whatever, and the survey's off, and, hey, your property lines don't match, there needs to be an adjustment. And either property's traded or corrections are made. In this instance, it's like, okay, we're not gonna worry about, somebody fencing a strip of city property.
There's some leverage there too, if they don't wanna put the site triangle in, so then you can move the whole fence.
Well, so on the site triangle issue, and granted, this is rudimentary math from 7th grade, if you're setting it back 6 feet from the sidewalk, the site triangle issue goes away, just about. Because if your driveway is at least 5 feet away from the fence,
Yeah.
then by the time you you work it all out, that 10-foot triangle's preserved.
Right. But
So-
if you're a foot away from the sidewalk. then you have
Your rudimentary math, though, I think when we were trying to do the ordinances, if this driveway was within 10 feet, 9 feet, 2 feet, whatever, then the fence had to be 10 feet on the property line, had to be 10 feet back from that point. So we don't get into measuring from driveway to property line and create a triangle. We just say, hey, if it's within 10 feet, the fence goes, there needs to be that 10-foot point back on the angle.
So all I'm saying is that angle will only come into play if the driveway's closer than 5 feet to the property line.
Well, okay, but I guess I'm not understanding, because the way the ordinance is written specifies that if the driveway is within 10 feet of the property line, not of the fence, and so then you have to do the 10-foot side triangle. So then you take that 6 foot, there's still gonna be 4 feet of side triangle that's gonna come into play behind that 6-foot line, because the driveway is within 10 feet of the property line. So are we saying the same thing, or?
Yeah, let me just draw it up here so it.
And just so you know, Eric brought up a point that when he
Stop
said.
saying my name on the
When he
internet.
said 10 feet back, that's not 10 feet back from sidewalk, that's 10 feet back from property line, so technically it'd be 11 feet back from the sidewalk. Right? So,
I'm just saying, what
In
happens
most
is,
instances.
yeah.
if you're measuring your 10-foot side triangle, you're measuring it from this property line here, right? So you're coming 10 feet here and going 10 feet up this way to here. And so if this line comes across like this, if this fence is back 6 feet, 6 feet, then unless the driveway is within the 5-foot line here, you won't have to cut the fence.
But the way the ordinance is written, the side triangle begins, if this is the property line between
So it's on the property line?
It's on the property
Okay.
line, so it would actually be this line.
Yeah, we don't wanna get into how
All
far
that
is your
other stuff.
driveway from this and that, the if-then scenarios.
That's why we need pictures.
What's the formula for a triangle again?
A squared plus B squared equals C squared.
And what is that called? Hey, good job.
3, 4, 5.
Hey, other discussion on this? Sounds like
Did we solve anything?
I don't feel there's quite a consensus
So
yet.
are we at 5 foot or 1 foot?
So does the 1 foot solve it, make it safe if we still require the side triangles?
I would still feel better about having a separation between the sidewalk and the fence, but that's just me, and I don't vote on this in
More
the
than
end.
1 foot?
More than 1 foot, yes.
And the other thing we talked about,
What
one.
for?
Huh?
For aesthetics or for safety?
I would say both. I think fences right onto the street, I think doesn't look great in a neighborhood.
Well, and
Sorry.
you and I kinda talked about as we drive back, what you can do with the snow. You know, the guys who are clearing the snow, you got 1 foot, you're not gonna put that snow there, so you're gonna throw it out into the park strip, which isn't gonna be thrown out in the park strip, it's gonna get thrown out in the road.
And when the
Same
snowplow
plastic
pushes it, it's going to hit that fence and dump right onto the sidewalk.
So
as
that's
well.
another challenge you got, so.
I'm still at my 5 feet.
I know you are, I'm still the 1 foot.
Snowplow is probably a good one, actually, I hadn't thought of that, 'cause, yeah. If the snow generally goes beyond the park strip,
Well, we go to Arizona in the winter, so.
You don't have sidewalk in front of your house, you're good.
Global warming is not gonna be an issue.
Wait a year and we won't have to worry about it.
So, where are you, Cheryl? 1 foot, 5 feet?
I'm not for 1 foot. I think there's too many unforeseens, and it doesn't look good, and for snow, safety, I don't know that it has to be, I agree with the property owners should have some rights in what they can do, but also, I don't know where that happy medium is, but it's not at 1 foot. And it not maybe necessarily isn't at the 5+1, maybe it is just easy to round it to 5, I don't know.
Well, it's true that if you go further than 1, go towards the 5 feet, then you do take care of, some of the triangle stuff is automatically taken care of. I I don't know that it, unless we go far enough that it's always taken care of, you're still gonna have to have triangle in the ordinance.
So simplicity would say 5 feet. We eliminate the need for the side triangle unless
If indeed we do, somebody's gotta do the math or do
the
the.
driveway's within the 5 foot that your rudimentary math talked about.
Well, no, I think what Brandon said is correct, cause you measure the 10 foot on the property
On
line.
the property line.
So there would still be
Yeah.
There'd still be
4
some
foot
side triangle.
You'd have to crop the corner.
Yeah, basically.
Just remember, all of the lots that we see, a lot of them are at 90-degree angles, but there's a lot of them that aren't. So you're never gonna be perfectly perfect unless you have those lots that are totally, symmetrical.
And it
There's a
only
lot of
applies to the ones that the driveway's within 10 feet.
Adjacent, within that 10 feet.
Unless it's on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Well,
If
Phil
it's-
says it doesn't have to be perfect until 9 o'clock, and then
Well,
You have plenty of time.
the other good thing is this land use permit process would sort of give people a chance to review it for all these different configurations hopefully before a homeowner proceeded, so.
but it's coming up
That's
with
what
those
helped.
configurations that you want them to adhere to.
Right.
So what do you think, Cheryl? 4 feet back from the property line, is that enough?
I think that's fair.
Total of 5 feet from the sidewalk? What's that, not quite the length of this table?
Table's probably 6
Table's
foot.
6 foot table, thank you, lifetimes.
So now,
This far back?
It's the width of 2 tables.
I wanna know what the criteria is.
So what-
Doing this.
but what is that? Right now, our existing ordinance allows you to go to the 1 feet if you're 3.5 feet tall.
Maybe Rob and Brandon, one thing, what did you find from other cities in this? It sounds like you've done a review to determine that 10 feet. I pulled
said,
up
you
6 or
guys
7 while
again?
we've been sitting here and found some that allow it, some that have the one that we have currently. Was there a kind of any general consensus you saw, or just all over the place?
On the setback itself,
On this side yard specifically, since that's where,
Um,
corner lot side yard.
my recollection was that it was significantly less commonplace than, the site triangle requirement. Site triangle requirement is the most common and most crucial for safety. I recall that I came across a couple of instances of a setback being required, but it wasn't, like the site triangle is basically in almost every city's ordinance in some version or another. And the setback was there occasionally, I guess is what I would say.
I'm just wondering, because that, help us. Maybe it is just perfectly fine to have it, without a setback, or maybe it's common to have one, so might be nice to know that.
Or,
If it were, you say it was most common, I'd be really interested to know what setback, how far back from the sidewalk they.
I'd have to review it to speak confidently, but I believe the ones that I saw were 10 feet.
10 feet to the property line from the.
10 feet from the property line backward into the yard.
And just
That's what you're saying. So 11 feet from the sidewalk.
Like what we've been talking about, the
We've
5.
been talking about
it's been
5, and you're saying it's.
The ones that I recall, but it's been a couple of months since I looked at them and crafted the ordinance, but the ones that I recall had a 10 foot setback. But then again, they weren't very common, so.
So most of them were up to the property line with the site triangle cropped on the corners, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Which would be the 1 foot with a site triangle.
Well, there's a house that's on the corner of, right, and, believe it or not, I do go walking once in a while, even though I'm fat, but, when we come walking around and come down 1050, I turn on 2700 right by my house, that corner lot. They built the house, they built their fence right against the sidewalk, their shed's right up against the sidewalk, and their fence leans in, cause it's built crappy and got a big old, can you say crappy in the city council meeting? Okay, anyway, and so you, just what Don was saying.
We do have one resident, by the way, who said, "Thank you, Phil, for moving here." So your comments have been paid attention to.
What? Somebody's watching you.
You got a vote.
Somebody said thank you, it was his wife.
Oh, yeah, her name's Margene.
So, but anyway, to
Probably
Don's,
was.
to Don's point, it does seem narrower, but part of that's that fence is leaning, so, to the point that, you know, but it's not 1 foot back, so I don't have a comparison of walking along a fence that's 1 foot back that's perfectly plumb and is in good shape, you know, I don't know what that's like to walk along that fence line. My thought again is, you know, we shouldn't, property owner's rights, but if I wanted to maintain it, I'd wanna put a mow strip underneath it, if I had that fence that close, so, you know, I mean, I'd wanna put a mow strip underneath it anyway, just to mow it anyway, so, if that's the case, then if you're gonna allow fence and they wanna put a mow strip underneath it, I think it needs to be farther off the sidewalk, you know, so, not farther than 5 feet, but I mean, it needs to be more than a foot off, so I mean, there's a whole nother.
Well, but if you only put a foot off, you just pour cement to the sidewalk. And don't even
you
maintain
know, and
that
I-
side. That's, I've seen people that have done that, that's.
And
what
I
they've done.
think we have a cement on top of all of those utilities too, if there are utilities.
Yeah, you already got them on,
10 foot.
you got your sidewalk that you got them in underneath anyway.
We have very few
Under the
utilities actually
sidewalk,
under
under
the
the
park
park
strip,
strip,
under
under
the
the
backyard.
backyards, they're all over that place.
So anyway, I don't have a great answer. I mean, if I was gonna put the fence to where I wanted to maintain it and really wanted to maintain it, really, I'd want it the width of a lawnmower at least, so I'd run a mower down
What's the
there.
deck of lawnmower?
21 inches?
I don't know,
27 inches?
22 inches, I think. is
Now
what it
we're
tells
getting
me.
regulated.
Well, but I think that's getting my blades like 22 inches, so I'd say, well, we make it 3 feet off the sidewalk.
Well, mine's bigger though.
Well, because you got
So-
more property, you're rich.
So
I got a poor man.
I got a riding mower, so we need 4 feet then.
I have one of
We're
them
back-
push mowers.
If that's how we're making rules.
Got a weed
So,
whacker.
so I wanna know, when you feel, however you feel, walking along a fence that's 1 foot away, do you feel unsafe? Do you feel?
Do I?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Does anybody feel unsafe?
No, a foot away isn't that bad. It's when it's right up against the sidewalk, you've taken away at least a foot of the sidewalk usability.
Is it safe?
Sidewalks aren't safe anyway.
But it's, go right in the middle of the road, drive.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
pay attention or you'll break your neck.
So where are we
Well, the
then?
best argument so far for moving it more than 1 foot back from the sidewalk is the mayor's, snow, or somebody's snow.
So let's do 3 feet from the sidewalk, 2 foot from the property line, Steve?
What we do a study and figure out if we have this much snowfall in a year.
Oh, my
we need-
God. Let's give Jim that assignment. He's not here.
The ignoble prizes have already been awarded for this year.
You be comfortable with 3 feet from the sidewalk? I'm comfortable with 3, Carl?
I'm not opposed to it.
His mower's 28, so he'd even go down a half a foot.
Dude, I try to get my kids to mow. I hate mowing. So.
Lynn, how are you feeling?
I think I could go with, I like 1 foot because it gives the property owners their rights, and if they wanna move their fence back so they've got more place to put the snow. I'm not real feet set in concrete on 1 foot, I can go with 3. But I hate moving it further and further in.
Well, see, and that's one thing I think I like the land use permit too, though, because if we do keep it at 1 foot, they can even remind them, say, just remember that snow can't go out in the road, not supposed to.
That's a
You know.
thought. We have a chance
Shove
that
it
we
over
can
that
hand them
6-foot fence.
we can hand them, some sheet of guidelines or something like that, once we've gone through the checklist and reached the ordinance. And
Here's your 52-page
Fence ordinance.
fence ordinance, go ahead and, if
So
you
let me
wanna
just-
put one in.
I just wanted to throw out one other thought process. We haven't talked type of fences other than solid fence. What if they wanna put a chain link fence up? Can they put it, does it matter if they're right up against the sidewalk, or if they?
One kind of fence to
I
another,
mean, but,
just complicates the issue.
you know,
Cheryl and I were just talking. It doesn't matter because nobody shovels corner lots
Because you're assuming.
in the
that
winter.
they're shoveling.
Somebody does. Most people don't. There's an awful lot of them.
Yeah, we're talking to the homeowner right here.
You know why, we, so I will I'll do my corner, but
Well, yours doesn't go anywhere, the one.
Right,
on your
right,
side.
right, but even when I do that one, the challenge is this plow comes down and fills that handicap corner, and that's the part that sucks to get out. Except I make my boys go out there with the square
Garden
nose.
shovel.
I take a square nose, and get out there and shovel that. It's the best thing for shoveling ice.
There's an awful lot of
We're
them.
lucky they don't
Just,
have to do
yeah,
it.
they don't shovel.
So it sounds like we could come back with something at a 3 foot from the sidewalk, 2 foot from property
So-
line?
John, if somebody challenged us that on their property rights, how does that stand? Say, I wanna put a fence on the property line,
So we have,
or is it not?
especially when safety is a concern, we have a lot of ability to regulate. So, and I think that where ours is gonna end up being an ordinance, it's one of the more property owner friendly, by letting them go out that close, it should be safe.
So if we're gonna do that, then why don't we just go back to the 1 foot and the side triangle? Then whatever they do is unto them.
They wanna move it closer because we gave them some guidelines that said
Since we're so
could
concerned
have
about
snow
property
removal
rights,
property.
just go 1 foot. Land use will take care of all that, and then we can be done. Everybody's happy,
Are you happy?
thrilled.
And
So everybody isn't happy.
No, I would be fine with that. I agree with property rights, and it seems like the more we regulate, you have to make rules to regulate, and it just gets beyond a joke. I said that last time too. So, I just think it's up to them. If they wanna put it 1 foot, then they have to maintain that 1 foot, and
Yeah, we could say we recommend this many feet and remind them that they can't throw their snow out on the road.
it has to be shoveled.
And I still think we have to do land use.
I think if you do the land use, that'll
I
help a
think
lot.
that's one thing we're much in agreement on.
And the side triangles seems to be.
Yeah.
Kinda fun.
So 1 foot site triangles,
Land use.
land use,
Anything you wanna build it out of.
anything you wanna build it out of,
Well, no.
any normal fence material.
I like the point you brought up, because, yeah, I think they use metal siding and put metal studs up or railroad ties every 6 feet and put metal siding on it. I don't think that would look good. I mean, I think we ought to have some type of a,
We can't regulate
maybe,
ugly.
well, why can't, we just
Pages to this range.
we just did that with the shed, saying it has to be similar building material to that building, of the house. I mean, we could do something like it has to be a color that matches the house, or it has to be chain link, or, I mean, I think cause if we do it, someone will end up using,
Has to
wasn't
be
it, wasn't out
listed
in
on the
Roy?
National Fence Supply website.
Well, wasn't it out in Roy, they were building a fence out of cars? And, you know, I
In
mean,
Oregon, we had a fence that was made out of car hoods.
Oh, that'd be cool. I like that.
Oh, baby.
you know, but you know what I mean, so I think we need to have some type of a regulation, or we may get some of that. Or razor wire, do we have does the regulation say you can't use razor wire? So, I mean, Eric, your point, I think, is a valid one, I mean,
Yeah, we have a lovely fence at the corner of Fruitland Drive and Mountain Road
Yeah, we do,
Yeah,
that,
lovely.
that's pretty much still solid steel paneling and,
that's exactly what it is.
then I don't like that fence.
I don't either.
So if we said commercial.
What about the
relatable
14-foot
fencing
tall
products?
concrete one on the corner of 300 and 2700?
Don't
You
go
got
concrete,
put in.
cause I like concrete, but,
Oh, the UDOT fence?
That you
See
if
what
you're gonna
they
turn
say
on
now
2700,
In terms of fence
you
material.
take your life in your hands, cause there's a
Doesn't even
14-foot
address it.
wall next to you. You can't, right on the sidewalk.
oh, that sound wall, they consider that a sound wall, not a fence. That's different.
Yeah. Well, I say we make a regulation for sound walls then.
Eric, so thanks for throwing that wrench into that. So,
Where are we, council, cause then this will go back to planning commission for a recommendation, and then come to council, so,
I think the planning commission needs to talk about the fence and what type, and then bring it back to us.
But we have agreed on land use permit
I say
1
land use
foot.
permit, 1 foot,
with all kinds of recommendations to go further based for whatever, all the reasons we have.
and site
And
triangle.
site triangles
So that's pretty much what the planning commission recommended, except we recommended it to be 50% see-through if you went 6 feet tall.
That's really the only difference.
So
What
the
you
only difference
recommended
is
would
what
be
you,
we'd allow solid.
what the material is. You would allow solid. I mean, obviously in the ordinance or somewhere you need to refer to some kind of a standardized
Other than the
fence
definition
material.
of fence.
While we're doing it, then
But-
can we do the whole fence thing?
Which could be
And look at
edges
materials,
as
look
far
at
as-
definition
No,
of
that
fence
is included
heights,
in the
and do the whole
definition.
fence ordinance, cause it's all tied in together, and we're gonna be doing it anyway.
You know, a while ago, it had to do with the sign ordinances,
Uh-huh.
how, where that started from, like the curb, the road, the curb, and then,
Right,
and then
right.
how the,
Or if their
Uh-huh.
yard is steep or,
so
yeah.
they did come up with
Yeah.
in the ordinance something that defined that, and I don't know if it would work
Well,
for.
and that's where we run into the fence height
fencing.
things, when people are putting fences on. Fence panels come pre-built, 6 feet high, and so if somebody puts a retaining wall, it's technically, you gotta cut it. And nobody's gonna do that, it's ridiculous. And so there's some stuff that needs to be addressed in the whole
It says
thing.
any material.
And we're really, I think we're really close on the corner lots. And let's just kick in the other stuff and get it addressed and do it all at once. Rather than.
So you
doing
want
three-
it back at us? I'm
No,
just
I
trying to get it
don't.
done right here so it stayed
I
at city
don't.
council.
I don't wanna ever see it again, it's like sign ordinances, I don't ever wanna see those again either.
The fence definition says a tangible barrier or obstruction of any material. So if somebody suggested commercially available or something along those lines, we could add something like that in there if you're disposed to do that.
What do what other cities do?
We haven't researched that. I don't think, we didn't research that, did we?
I think a lot of them don't address that issue, but I can do further research.
If you want us to look at it while we're looking at
Somebody
this other,
threw
we
out
can
an
use.
example of the fence that some of us wouldn't want. That, is it their right to put up whatever they want?
Save.
Yeah, I'm all for the carpet fence. I just think we don't want that.
You see the fence goes all the way out, just to, there's just.
I just brought up, question is, if they put it up next to you, are you favor of
It
that?
depends, it depends on what the carpet is.
That's our house there.
Right.
No
And
you
this
goes,
is that corner
no
lot.
you goes
You
hunting.
can see the fence comes all the way out. to the
And now
sidewalk.
goes along the sidewalk there.
What's that? And it's a 6-foot cinder block fence. And this guy's driveways,
And there's,
Huh?
you're down in Mesquite.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have a couple more too, discussion.
Okay, so let's ask planning commission chairman and Rob, do you feel good about the guidance you have for the future planning commission discussion on this? Brandon?
Can I summarize them? I have a 1 foot setback, so that's at the sidewalk, is it, or 1 foot behind the sidewalk?
Basically
That's-
on property line.
Sorry, say it again.
It'd be on property line.
property line.
Okay, so it can be on the property line.
Because you're gonna have some subdivisions that the property line is where the sidewalk is. I guarantee you, some of the older ones, I'll bet
So
they
should we
are.
just say foot back from the, let's just take foot back from the sidewalk.
Does that work?
On property line or 1 foot back of sidewalk,
Yeah.
whichever
The minimum,
is
of the
greater.
greater.
Sidewalk?
Okay, so, and then the side, 10-foot side triangle, but you wanna put in there that we recommend that it be 3 feet back and give the reasons why?
Give them, something like we recommend a further setback of the fence for the following reasons.
Okay.
Easier to maintain, you've got a place to throw snow.
Safety.
And then, do
Safety, yeah.
you want the planning, I have 2 more questions, do you want the planning commission to then start addressing the issue of commercially available fences and aesthetics or materials, or do you not
I'm
want
not
to?
so sure.
Okay.
We can at least research it, and you can
What
decide what you wanna
material?
do.
Then
Yeah.
the final question I have for you is on in the proposed ordinance, it states that when we've talked about the 10-foot fence, those addressed existing driveways, if existing driveways were within 10 feet. And then it says no new fences, or no new driveways shall be within the 10 feet. So, do you wanna keep that provision? Does that make sense? No newly constructed driveways are supposed to be within 10 feet of the rear property line of the corner lot. Do you wanna keep that provision?
Meaning, like if they were adding a second driveway?
No,
If they were for an RV pad or something.
Oh, an RV pad.
Or infill.
Or building a
Infill,
house on a
right,
lot, right?
Right, so if the corner lot's built before the other lot, and then or any new construction is built, any new driveway needs to be at least 10 feet back.
It makes sense because then your fence, if there was a fence there, it'd be non-compliant if they did, right? It would make their fence non-compliant.
That's gotta be in the building side of things, not the fence side, cause the guy putting the driveway in next to the fence isn't coming in and asking to put a fence up. He's building his house and pouring a driveway. So that part of it comes into play when the person's building the house or pouring a driveway, not when somebody's building a
Can't pour a
fence.
driveway within.
So that
Yeah.
catch-all needs to be somehow on the building permit side.
Well, one way to do that would be on our building permit applications, there's a planning checklist, so, and there's a blank fields where I can put driveway needs to be 10 feet back from the property line.
A corner lot and rear property line.
Yes.
Don't most subdivisions, when they're putting them in, have, do they have some type of covenants that they want the houses or standards? that
They got their CCRs, yeah.
And some of those even have their, what they will allow as fencing too.
Yeah,
Yep.
like our CCNRs on our developments, we don't allow chain link fence, we don't
So
allow,
most of that,
so
some of
that
that
kind
will
of
be
stuff
taken
gets
care
There's a
of.
lot of those in newer subdivisions that have those requirements already. But it is a question maybe for a builder, you know, if you've got a project in several phases, where you're planning the driveway on that side, but maybe the corner lot is phase 2 and the next house is phase 3, is that a concern if it gets fenced right away and now?
I think when we
Your
talked about it,
driveway
we just
is
said,
on
you
the
just put a
wrong side.
driveway in. There can be an RV pad right up to the property line, but within 10 feet of the sidewalk, it needs to veer over 10 feet, so it needs to have that angle.
Well, what
To
I'm saying
create
is
that
like
makes
a neighborhood being built in phases.
Mm-hmm.
And the corner lot goes in first. The next house is going in, but not till next year,
Yeah.
you know, and it's designed to have the driveway next to the house.
So
Now,
if
the
there's a
fence
fence,
goes in
if there's a
and-
fence in,
Yeah.
then they gotta keep the first 10 feet of the driveway over, which
No, now
the
they're talking about
driveway's
the
always
driveway
gonna
to
be
the
10
other
feet
side.
over,
Oh, the driveway
because
always will be?
the house
Okay.
has to be 10 feet away from it.
Yeah.
So it's only in the instance they're gonna pour an RV pad or an extra wide driveway.
Oh, okay, okay, I
That,
see.
so the first 10 feet near that property line, his little triangle that he drew, that's only really where
Only
this
for
driveway's
RV
relevant,
pads.
is that. So in essence, you're creating a 10-foot tall by 20-foot wide triangle against the sidewalk right at the property line, both with a driveway on one side and a hypothetical line to a fence on the other.
We did that to basically prevent making it simpler going forward, to add that 10-foot required distance. So there'd be
So the
less.
council in 10 years doesn't come back and say, well, that guy's out of compliance, his fence is right next to the driveway. Because the fence was done first and.
So,
Okay, anything else on that topic? Okay, well, thankfully that was our largest topic, or longest topic of the evening, because we still do have some on the agenda. Great discussion though, and that is, government at work right there, so thanks everyone. It's been a good discussion. Let's move on to discussion on agricultural zones in the city. This is just a general discussion, it's not been taken up by planning commission or council yet, but it came up recently, it went through planning commission and through us, that one that was being rezoned, a property to allow a horse property to R18 ag. The council had some questions about, you know, why do we have this provision? Why is it only, the only ag zone happens to also be on 8,000 square foot lots, when you can't have any house on it, or any animal on an 8,000 square foot lot besides a dog, a cat, a bird. no farm animals, no agricultural animals. So we just wanted to have just kind of a general discussion. The council brought up some points of maybe we need to have ag possible in other zones of the city. And then also there was some discussion about whether we still need an R18 zone in general. So I asked Rob to do a little research on this. This is just gonna be a general discussion, and then based on how this goes, council can kind of give some guidance. Would you like this to get taken up by planning commission?
So, and then if you'll pull that map up, that'd be helpful. So, you wanna take a 5-minute break there, or people running?
Well, how do you all feel? Break
Keep
or
going.
keep going?
We're just getting cookies.
Okay, they're just
Just a cookie run.
food break, okay.
All right, very good. What I've handed out to you is our existing ordinance as it relates to animals and fowl within the 2 zones that are allowed, exclusive of when we start talking about chickens, which those are allowed in all of our residential zones. So the R18 AG, I've given you a copy of the provision that talks about animals and fowl relative to that, and also what it calls for in the RE20 zone. So you can see that there's a little bit of a allowance for more intensity. For example, I didn't realize this, I hadn't read this in a while, that you can actually have pigs in the RE20 zone.
Only if it's 4-H.
That's all. Just stay down.
Yeah, number 3.
But I really like
Irrespective of that, you can still have a pig.
I really like bacon. Is that a provision?
Yeah, but it's not a permanent, it's just temporary from what 4-H allows.
I understand that.
Pot-bellied pigs?
So when I was a green planner many years ago, working in Davis County, we had an area between North Salt Lake and Bountiful that was in the unincorporated area. And they had an agricultural zone there, and a guy in like a basic subdivision wanted to have a pig. And we're sitting there, and a guy comes into the meeting and is just sitting there, didn't show up for that at all, and stands up after a long discussion about pigs. He says, "I have one thing to say, pigs stink. Pigs stink," and sat down. Anyway.
How did he feel?
Believed, I guess. Anyway. So, can we pull up the zoning map?
Isn't this it? That's it.
That's not it. That's not the whole thing. If you go down, I think a little bit further, it's on that page. It's on the web page.
This is the web page. Oh, come over here and look. This is what I've got, the zoning map.
Right. There we go. It'll take a minute for it to load.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
Okay, there we go.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. This is our zoning map. It takes a little bit of time to populate because it's such a big map. But you'll recall that the discussion that we had this last week was in relation to this whoa.
It's just trying to make it bigger.
Yeah.
And it went away.
You know what, Rob, you touched it, and that's what did it.
I did not.
There it
I've
is.
learned.
There you go.
So, let's see if I can, that property is right here that we were talking about in the public hearing this last week. And you remember there was some discussion about whether or not this island, when it develops, or when this RE20 zone develops, what would prevent someone from requesting an R18 AG in a similar circumstance.
and placing a bunch of 8,000 square foot lots in.
when you've got for the most part, this area is a R110 zone that's surrounding this property and what have you. So when you look at the R18 AG, we'll have this little sliver here, you have some property over here, and then you have all of this property in here that's all R18 AG. So we have a considerable amount of it, whether or not, haven't had time to really look to see if there's anybody that has animals that much within those areas, but potentially that's what's allowed in those locations. The city, when you look at our long-term future, there's about pretty close to 50% build-out now. What I mean by that, we still have a considerable amount of vacant land that's still in the city. An awful lot of it's up here on the east bench, on the north bench, I should say. We have a fair amount of it that's still in this RE20 down on the southeast corner. So there's a lot of potential development that is going to occur over the years. So the question then becomes, do you want to provide for that housing type and for that land use type in the future? And if you do, then you can pretty easily model something like this after that. So an R110 AG, if you wanted to do something like that, you can see that in the R18 AG zone, it has those zoning districts, animals or fowl, in the R18 AG zoning districts only. That little paragraph is within the overall chapter that identifies uses for all of our residential zones. So it would be pretty easy to create and say animals or fowl in the R18 AG and R110 AG. We would still have to create an R110 AG in the table, but it would be relatively simple to do something like that. So that's what's before you, is whether or not you want to pursue the R110 AG as an option, or other things that you would like to introduce as part of that discussion.
So I just got a question. Doesn't the R110 already allow like chickens?
All of our residential zones allow chickens.
So
And
this,
based on the acreage,
yeah, this
then
is,
you're allowed to have
yeah.
more.
Yeah,
I
this-
didn't include that.
This would be horses, sheep.
right. This is just for the, I mean, it says
Larger animals.
animals or fowl, so that's why I just,
Right.
as far as I know, a chicken's fowl.
We have a,
Pheasants.
we have a separate provision in.
Pheasants.
Pheasants, ducks, geese, or domestic geese, people have.
We have
This-
a separate ordinance in chapter 10 that talks about chickens, and it lists all of the
Right.
zones in there. In addition to that, it gives some other criteria, and amongst those are
So this is just in a,
lot area.
this is basically for a provision if we have an R110 area that has a chunk of property there that happens to be acre or larger, they can do other critters,
Correct.
right? But right now they can't.
Well, but
They have the option to rezone
the
their
question
property.
I would
Correct,
have is, a
correct.
rezone really necessary, or should we just allow that? Because,
But don't we have to, and if we allow that, don't we have to do an R110 ag?
right,
Yeah, so.
well, if we're gonna make it a new zone,
Or you could just allow it in the R110 zone. I mean, you could just say any lot, anywhere in the
without having
city
to go
that
through
there's
the
an acre.
rezone process per se.
acre regardless of zone.
I mean, you could
Because
do that.
even though this is R110, which is our
Consequences of
smallest
that
single-family residential,
So,
All you would
It
have
still
to do
requires an
is
acre.
add R110 in that upper category there, and it would be done just that
Yeah.
quickly. I would suggest
Yeah, do we
that-
want that though? I know a lot of
It's
lots that are an
against
acre in residential where the neighbors may not want to have, you know, animals next door, that just cause their neighbor has a big lot.
Because I don't know how many big lots we
You know.
have in these R110 areas, but potentially somebody could have animals if you introduce that type of use there. Where or they don't have it today. If they already have it today and it's identified as an existing use, it's not it might be non-conforming, you may be introducing another
So
opportunity.
that would be the only reason to have a separate zone is for the existing ground, if somebody would like to have animals, and they got a large lot, then there's the notice that goes out to the neighbors that they're rezoning their ground and this is why, and then all of a sudden, everybody gets their notice rather than
You have
just.
an acre? Acre and a half. Would you wanna put critters on it?
Oh,
Not a horse, not a cow, maybe a goat to eat the weeds. That might not be bad.
You could put them in that mow strip right between the
Not a
sidewalk
pig.
and the fence.
Not any fowl, but I'd
Well,
probably put a goat on for the
But,
kids.
so that might be
Yeah.
something that, as long as we're revisiting this to talk about, cause if we're gonna
I
allow
don't know, an
goats, we'll-
acre is really enough for a cow or a, you know, I don't know.
Well, I'm just thinking, do we wanna say it has to be in their, I mean, does it have to be in the rear yard? Cause you don't wanna have someone tying a goat in the front yard to eat the grass, right? I mean, I'm just, or do you?
I'm just gonna say, right here on 2600, it happens regularly.
Why not? The city goats eat the weeds right out next to the sidewalk.
So,
On the detention ponds.
Yeah, and they're, I mean,
Higher than.
I like the more rural stuff, like, I like farms in the neighborhoods, I like when I see animals in neighborhoods. That's me, I know other people do not wanna see that at their next door neighbor, I mean, that's a great point, so, but I personally like it. I think the more we have that, it's something that's cool about North Ogden, that interspersed in so many areas, we have that still kind of.
So as it pertains to the undeveloped ground that's R110, R18, whatever, and they could be large lots, or you have zone that's, here's the zone, and so we allow the animals because it's not developed. And I think of a neighborhood like where I'm at, there's lots that are 1 acre, that people are in there, or like up at the Cove, if somebody's got two lots up there, and they say, you know what, I'm gonna put a cow out there. I don't know that that would go over very well with the neighbors. And so that's
They've
where,
got deer regularly.
yeah, deer don't stink as much as
Yeah, I
cows.
think cows and horses need actually more than an acre if we were to gradiate it, because
Not if you feed them. I mean,
and,
they just need
What
room
they
to
leave
drink
on the
and,
ground that creates the
Yeah.
issue.
and we have had several people in the Cove buy 2 or 3 lots and combine them that would make an acre lot. I mean, granted, it's the HP's one zone, but, so you're probably right, you don't wanna.
so as far as just granting it to any zone in general, I think you, just for the simple fact of the existing developments, that rezone brings up all the public notice that the neighbors can come in and say, I don't want a horse next to me or whatever, and we can weigh the situation. But then that goes down the lines of, well, then do you allow it by conditional use? You know? It's
So what you're saying, it makes more sense to have a 110 AG zone.
only for the reason that from where we're at now, it would require a rezone. So then
Right.
all the public notice goes out and it's done the proper way versus if we just
A blanket.
adopt it
If
in
you've
our
got an
one
acre or
ten.
more, you can do, yeah, that makes sense.
So if the mayor wants to put cows in his backyard or a cow, he would have to rezone his property so the neighbors are made aware that he's changing the use of his ground,
And in the
whether
situation we
they
had,
care or not.
in the situation we had 2 weeks ago where it was it's a future subdivision and the property is surrounded by R110, but they wanted to leave a 2 acre parcel for somebody to be able to put on animals, but we had to rezone it to R18 ag instead of R110 ag because there wasn't a R110 ag
Right.
zone. So it just presents a problem in the future when you got the neighbor to the east or whatever that says, hey,
And all of those lots were much bigger than,
exactly.
they could have easily been R110.
And so the developer essentially could go back and say, okay, I want 8,000 square foot lots. Or in the future, you got somebody to the east or wherever surrounding saying, hey, that you let them have a R110 ag, I want the same thing, I'm gonna put 8,000 square foot lots. It would have been nice to have that option.
Well, the original concern, I just looked at it on its face, and it says it's an R18 zone, but they want horses in it, but an R18 says it's gonna be an 8,000 square foot property. It doesn't make sense to have a zone only for to allow somebody to put a horse on it, when you say the minimum is 8,000, when it has to be an acre. Even our discussion, about making R110s an ag, it just doesn't make sense. Now, maybe because there's a lot of road behind us, with lots of people out there with R110 properties, and if we just declared an acre and you can have a horse, that maybe gives us a lot more problems than having these zones that just don't make sense. Maybe we do have to stick with some kind of a zone and do the noticing and all that. But my concern was it just didn't make sense, and we kind of forced this landowner into that zone because it's the only one that
Worked for
worked for him.
That was the only one available, that's right.
Well, plus the frontage was another issue.
Yeah, that was the issue why we couldn't do an RE20, was because he didn't have the frontage, the 100-foot frontage to do the RE20.
Something like that.
So we had to do the R18 ag, because he had the frontage for that.
Right. Well, you could have done the RE20, but you would have lost a lot.
Right, yeah, would have lost a lot.
In which case it could have been R115s or 12s, because spread that extra lot out.
One of the things that's very consistent throughout the ordinance is this idea that there should be a minimum of 1 acre for larger animals. That is part and parcel of all of the standards that are out there. And as such, there's a certain thread to that is that minimum threshold. When we talked about accessory buildings, we even introduced the idea of an acre size there when we talked about barns and that. So the city has been pretty consistent in saying that is the minimum threshold when you're talking about quote-unquote agricultural uses. So there's a good thread to that as part of the approach that's been taken over the years.
But if we made a zone and somebody comes in and asks for it, what's the stipulation of approval or denial?
It's a legislative matter that would be viewed against the general plan. And as such, you would make a determination, is this compatible with the surrounding neighborhood or not? So
And
you got a
what
lot-
determines that, I think, is the follow-on question.
So if you have an uproar
What
of
makes
the
it
neighborhood,
compatible?
then
If the
that's where it gives the
If the
city.
current neighbors are upset, or
Yeah, if you're gonna
is
rezone
there anything more
it,
objective?
I can remember years ago, there was, and I don't know whether it was a resolution or an ordinance out in West Point, but they made it forbidden for anybody to move into an agricultural area and complain about the smell.
We were here first.
Yeah, I can remember when that happened, we kind of cheered.
Yeah, cause I just wonder, kind of along the lines Eric is going, what's the criteria? So there's at least some kind of objective way to measure this.
I mean, so there, a couple meetings ago, the property on Pleasant View Drive, right on the border of the city. Right below the canal.
Angel's Corner.
So some people want to come in and rezone that property to, we have it on the master plan as being medium density, which are R4, they wanted to do that. All the neighbors that have larger lots around there don't want that, didn't want that. And so it would be something similar to that, saying, well, we have this option, now it requires them to come in and say, well, this is what we'd like, and it gives the city the opportunity to weigh the situation for approval or not, rather, if that's really the case. I think we need to, if we're gonna do it, we need to have a way that we can be selective, as right or wrong as that is,
A couple of things that you could look at is what this is anticipating with R18 AG is the lot size. But you could look at a minimum zone boundary size as a standard. You could also look at surrounding properties and come up with some standards there with respect to what's on those sizes of adjoining lots in the area. I don't know, have to think a little bit more about what other kinds of standards you could put in there as a criteria. But those are the types of things that I would think that you would want to look at. I think we brought up in the hearing when we were talking about Angel's Landing, we were talking about this whole idea of spot zoning and that type of thing. So that sort of gets at that whole idea of you should have a minimum size for a zoning district, if you will, and placing it on the map. So that would be one thing that you could take a look at. There may be some others.
But
Well,
just a quick question on this one we had a couple weeks ago. I know the applicant has submitted subdivision, I mean, the lot sizes are, I think there wasn't anything smaller than 11,500 square feet lot. But since we passed this, is it possible for them to come back, I'm just looking forward in the future on this ag thing, is it possible for him to come back and say, I've redone my subdivision, I want 8,000 square foot lots, it's now an R18 ag?
Well, everything in that area, their existing zone is already R110.
Right.
So nothing prohibits anybody from making application. Again, it's a legislative matter, huge amount of discretion if I'm missing the point.
I think what he's saying is, since we've rezoned it as R18, he could change that portion of the subdivision
And
to
that was our
8,000 square
concern.
foot lots, if he wanted to. But when that was brought up in the council meeting, and what we found was that would require 80 feet of frontage, which he wouldn't have enough to get any more lots out than he already did. So it would be a concern, except that in that situation, you couldn't take 5 lots and turn it into 6, because you don't get another 80 feet from those 5 lots.
But it's a good point.
Well, that was our concern of going from an R110 area to an R18 ag.
And my concern about making them all R18 ag for the benefit of one of the properties to be big enough to have a horse. All the rest of them had to be 1/8, and I was asking the question, so does the subdivision have to have a same zoning within a subdivision?
Or can you do, I know we just love conditional uses here, but is that something that can be connotated in all zones? If you have more than an acre, then that's the process that it's done through. And so it's a little bit more controlled and
Makes more
selective.
sense to me.
That you could have an R110 zone and say, hey, I want this 3 acres of undeveloped ground, this guy wants to put horses here, can I do that? And then it's brought before the city, and then they decided, is this a fit for the neighborhood? Are the neighbors okay with it? Does it work? And then it's decided yes or no that, rather than on a little larger scale that you would handle zoning.
One of the issues that comes to mind with a CUP though is what John has said in the past and what Dave Church and others have said is that a conditional use is really a permitted use with conditions. So it's pretty hard to say no.
Yeah, so then do you say, well, but you can say no from a zone if you just don't like it.
Right.
More so than you can on a conditional use.
Is that right,
I'm a
John? It
bigger-
would be easier to
So
say
you
no
would be-
to a rezone than
So
to a
so in that
CUP.
case, you would wanna keep it as maybe that pocket zoning or
Well,
I
I'm a
don't know
big
how you
fan
would.
of development agreements when it comes to these kinds of things. That's where you can specify those types of conditions. As part of the rezone itself, you can require a development agreement that would then specify the unique characteristics of that particular neighborhood, in addition to what's in the
I
minimum
think that's what
standards
we're
for the
doing with
zone.
the one we did last week, right? Weren't we talking some development agreement?
Well, that was
to
an
make sure
option,
you-
but
Yeah,
you
was one of the
didn't,
options, but we let it go as R18 ag, and we're gonna, that we can change it later, cause it'll qualify to the R110.
Right.
In the interests of his timeline and what I think is kind of a faux pas on the part of the city to have a zone like that, we let him go.
So I guess the question is, do you want us to pursue the development of an R110 AG with some of the
I would prefer,
qualifying criteria that we've talked
I would
about?
prefer not zone specific, but more of an AG connotation to each zone through the process, through an application process or
A zoning application or a conditional use?
zoning
process,
application.
okay.
Something that gives us the ability to say no just because we don't like it.
Yeah, I would.
So I agree.
Like an overlay zone that you can apply for?
I mean, because you can't, somebody buys the Cove, somebody buys 2 lots up there, they have an acre, and they say, well, you can have, if you have an acre, you can have a cow and just get this CUP if you meet this, and then they come in and say, oh, I do it, and then be like, oh, we don't really want that.
Yeah.
So, but if it's in a zoning method, and you say, no, that doesn't fit the master plan of the city and the way we want the city to go. Because I think the intent is more, the areas that are already agriculture, allow them to continue such through the development process. And so, you know, keeping open space, somebody wants to do a development that says, hey, we're gonna have 3 or 4 large lots where people can have animals, and 10 small lots, and they wanna do a development that way, and we allow that avenue, and it doesn't have to be as small as 8,000 square foot lots.
That generally makes more sense to me and avoids the problem I think we created, whoever we were at the time that R18 Ag was created. That's a problem, and we'll create a problem again if we do an R110 Ag, I think. If there's any way around it, I think we gotta.
Another idea, think about this one, John, is that what we could do is we could have a sub-paragraph in the purpose and intent statement of those zones that addresses very specific issues. We could actually craft, I think, some, we don't wanna necessarily put them as criteria, but at least guidance, that when you did get an application, you would have something to help judge against that. That's another option there that may be real helpful.
One of the reasons you have more land in this area, and have a farm, have animals, we don't want there to be great big commercial industrial developments.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll need those for the next item, we'll just pull them up.
Yeah, that's what I'd say, research a way to do that, the zoning kind of a.
Well, the hard thing you run into is, if it's an agricultural building, a lot of the restrictions go away. And so we'll just need to kind of look at that as well, because, I mean, we want to encourage it, but, I mean, our height standards go away for an agricultural building, don't they? Or is it just the aesthetic considerations? Because setbacks still matter.
Yeah.
It's the fact that you don't have to get a building permit. This is one where you do want a land use permit, though. You want it cited properly. That's another good example of why a land use permit would be helpful.
Cows downtown, you like the ring of that? RCC Ag zone.
RCC Ag.
Forget the flag lots, let's put cows here.
Is that good enough direction? Is that specific enough to?
I think we're just gonna have to start scratching our head a little bit. Yeah, I think so.
How big a problem is it? I mean, we had that one that was just, it was one case and it was weird. And I think everybody had looked at it, it's like, you've got an 8,000 square foot lot that's gotta be an acre. But honestly, with property values where they are, this is gonna be a diminishing problem. There's gonna be less and less and less of it because all the farmland's gonna be sold off. Another 20 years, there won't be, probably won't be a 20,000 foot lot left in North Ogden. Because the property values are going up. I mean, it's just kind of the reality of what it is. So how much, how much do we need to work on it?
I mean, once property is put into an incorporated boundary, the idea is that it's going to eventually transition to an urban use.
Well,
in the array of urban uses, that's what we're talking about here, is expanding that. Say, for a while at least, we're going to continue to have the opportunity for some larger lots and some animals. That's what's allowed.
Didn't some of this address in the master plan, with some of those, the general plan?
It addressed trying to preserve some of the
Conservation
farmland
areas,
through
yeah.
conservation areas
Right,
to
yeah.
keep that, unique aspect of the city. We haven't had any progress on that yet, but that's one of the goals. And to your question, I don't think it's a huge issue either. Obviously, it hasn't come up that often. It may come up a little bit more in the future, you know, same way chickens did. More and more people are interested in backyard chickens. Other animals are not nearly as popular as the chickens, so, but, you know, I'm sure there's some interest in a few of these other kinds of animals in other areas. Is that enough to mean spend some time on it? I don't know. I have a large lot, and I don't think I'd put any of these on. The goat I say I would like for the kids, but they eat even the bark off a fruit tree, so really there's nowhere I would put a
You
goat.
wouldn't have 5 or 6 turkeys?
No. 10 chickens is good. And if I brought home any more
But a
animals,
turkey
my
egg
wife
is-
wouldn't be very happy with that. So,
I think,
so I don't know.
I'm just trying to remember how many, Brandon could chime in on this one. I think I've had, in 3 years, I've had maybe 2 phone calls for people wanting to have an acre lot in the city.
Oh,
Do
looking
something-
for one?
Looking for one to have, and specifically, they were looking at an RE20 zone. And they were looking at a property, and it didn't qualify for the 1 acre, so.
I do think it's nice to have areas where it's loud, because I think it's nice to see in the city personally, but other thoughts on this? Especially council, where would you like to go from here?
Well, I think we need to do a good enough job that we can deal with this. I looked around, all that wide area up there on the, close to the property we were talking about is all county, and there's a lot of land there, and there's a lot down along Fruitland. I can see some people wanting to have still a horse property, but you're right, I mean, if developers get a hold of it, they're gonna want squeeze in.
Not all of them. I don't like it.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
I'm just kidding.
So all inclusive.
All developers are crooks anyway.
Other thoughts on
And
this
builders.
topic?
No comment, come on.
Where to go from here?
No goats in the front yard, it's a bad idea.
I think the direction we're going, and maybe you wanted to kind of back off a little bit, maybe we.
Thanks, John, for laughing.
I'd like to see
We need a
us find a
definition.
zoning way to address what it seems to be logical, that if I want a horse, I want more property, it's because I wanna put a horse on it, or something agricultural.
Or somebody who already has that property that's in an existing zone. Like some of that's on Fruitland or Mountain Road, some of that farm ground is zoned R110,
They're not on the list.
you know? And
A lot
maybe
of
they
it's
wanna
zoned
have,
RE20 already, so.
yeah,
You can have horses and stuff on it,
so.
but they're still agriculture.
So, okay, we've got one idea on a way to move forward. Is that good?
I'm with Lynn.
Council? Okay. Rob, does that give you enough info? And Carl, Cheryl, feelings?
Jim says yes.
I'm with you.
Okay, so we will look at it then, Rob. Do you feel like you've got enough kind of guidance here? Okay, we have one more item, council, but we also have a young man who'd like to talk to council about an Eagle project. He just couldn't be here earlier, so are you willing to suspend the rules? Okay, to
Public
open.
comments, is that how you wanna do it?
Yes. So we have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and open this for comments right now. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, young man, so why don't you just come on up, please introduce yourself, we just need your name and address, and then,
You're not all crooks.
tell us about the project you're thinking about. Yeah, our podium is our YouTube microphone right now, this is being broadcast live to, no doubt, hundreds of citizens who are,
Millions.
Oh, and did you motion?
it's gone viral.
We've gone by it.
There has been 3 comments.
There has been some comments, and we've lost all of our audience but one.
There has been
Okay.
comments?
Couldn't hear you this side.
On Facebook.
What are the comments?
People like it.
Okay, well, my name is Alexander Matheson, director of 2952 North, 1025 East. Like the mayor said, I'm here about my Eagle project. So what it is give and take libraries, little boxes, I guess you would find places, take a book, leave a book. And I was talking to Parks and Rec about this, and they said, I'm allowed to put one in my own property, and if I want to put one in a park anywhere, I have to get city council permission. So, I would like to put one up in North Ogden Park, up towards the north parking lot.
Okay, so North Ogden parking up by, what road is that? 20?
Up by the library,
Yeah,
up by the museum.
Up by the museum.
Okay. Any questions, Councilman?
Well, I just, we've had several, young men come in and talk about, projects like this. You wanna put it in, what if, you build one for us and give it to us and let us put it where we wanna put it?
I would be
Is
fine with that.
is that an option? I don't know if
That
that's
would
what
be
we
an
wanna
option.
do, but is that an option that,
Yeah.
along with, I mean, or we can have him, give him permission to put it up there.
Yeah.
So, do you have a design or what you wanna, my concern too is that it would look ugly. That would be my concern. I'm not saying you would build it that way, but that's, aesthetically, we want it to be at least pleasing and fit with.
Yeah, I have a design, I don't think that's ugly.
That was poor wording on my part, but, we want it to be aesthetically pleasing, and then also, I would also like to know kind of the material you're using, just so maintenance wise, are you gonna maintain it for the next 5 years? Not put books in it, but if a door gets pulled off, or is that something that is part of the deal, or is it something that you'd give it to us and let us maintain it?
I was planning to maintain it for probably at least 3 years until I move off to college, and after that, I do not know, but up until then, I can maintain it.
Mayor, there is a, what do you call them? A take and leave box?
Public
Yeah.
libraries is what I've heard them called.
There's one that is on the backside, that gate that comes out of Oakland Park, the backside into that subdivision. There's one there,
Okay.
and that is not private property. I'm sure it's on city. So who allowed that? And if so, how did that get by and his doesn't?
I think
They
that's a
wouldn't have?
question for our city attorney.
And how is it maintained?
So
I have no idea.
we'll need to check with Parks and see if they, because we did have one other person come in and got approval, and I thought he was talking about putting some in Parks, and maybe that's one that Tiffany's already approved. But we'll need to check with the Parks Department to see if it was approved and see if we can somehow find out.
There was another one that came in and said that they were gonna build one for their house, then give one to the city also.
Yeah, well, that's what I was
And then they
wondering.
could put it wherever, the city could put it wherever, so.
And maybe that's the one. I know that someone was talking about putting it in on the trail, or some on the trail. Like Pleasant View has some on the trail.
And, yeah,
And so I just wondered if maybe this was that one that was given to us and then we installed, and maybe that's where Parks felt like it was a good spot.
I would probably suggest either one or two things, what Councilman Turner's suggesting, or there's just some kind of review process for the Parks and Rec to determine, yeah, this is a good location, or hey, let's move it 20 feet over here, something like that. Either of those could be made to work. So we just need some guidance from council, whether you want to do that now or talk about it at the next meeting.
I'm okay with leaving it to Parks and Rec.
yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I think they're in charge of it. They should.
If they feel like it's a good fit for the park, then,
Let them decide if they wanna put it in, or if he
Tiffany.
wants to put it in, right? Is that right? Is that what you're thinking too?
yeah, I don't think it needs to come to us.
I don't either.
I'm cool with that.
Well, Tiffany, do we wanna have some control over what kind of books are in there? I think we don't want to limit it too much, but there's some kind of material that could be in there that we, as a city, we don't want in there.
I think that's a risk with every one of those that are out there, that, somebody with less than honorable intent would put material in there that we wouldn't necessarily want in there. And I think whether it's on private property with access to the public as they have now, or on public property, I don't know, a placard that indicates that this is not maintained by the city, we're not responsible for its contents. Something along those lines that just simply says,
Because the ones I've seen actually are almost always in a park strip or something, which technically is
public, right? and anybody could put anything, walking by could put anything they wanted in there.
First Amendment says they can.
That's right. And, you know, maybe something as simple as a placard that says, you know,
Right.
it's donated by a great young man as an Eagle Project.
If someone thinks it's
Contents
offensive,
not
they can
monitored.
always check it out.
Yeah.
It's permanently what we're doing.
They don't have to take it home.
It is a public checkout process.
Contents not monitored, or,
I think something like that would probably.
or,
Yeah.
what's that?
No overdue fines.
That's right, that's
So
right.
just a simple thing like that, the content's not monitored by the city, this is a public,
Yeah.
you know, free use and
Yeah.
please keep the
John, come
content
up.
tasteful,
Put
something
it
like
in the
that.
magazine several times.
So,
John could come up with a.
so Alexander, I think the determination is work it out with the Parks and Trails folks,
We're
right?
good with it, work it out with Tiffany, yeah.
Good luck, enjoy them, I'm looking forward to see them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They're real popular, aren't they now? They're getting more and more popular, it seems like. Okay, thank you. So we'll go back to our last item, council.
on the right.
Are we gonna go back to public comment?
Yes, we will go back to public comments at the end for normal.
Yes.
So this is just kind of an update, well, we've got everyone here, so do you wanna just plow ahead, this won't be a long item, probably 20 minutes?
Thank you.
I was gonna say
Make it
10.
15?
We got 15, we got 10. Do we got 10? Anyone 10?
Okay, so it's an update on the form-based code. We wanted to just have a conversation while we've got the full council, well, almost all the council, almost all the planning commission. There's been some members of the planning commission, some members of the council, and some citizens and business leaders in the city working on a form-based code proposal. We've done a field trip, we've done a work group session. Brandon's gonna kinda just give us a little update on how that's gone, few pictures, share some stuff that has been learned, and then just a little update on where we are in the process.
Okay, so, we've been through, in the last few months, we've had several meetings with the Economic Development Committee. We've also had, a field trip most recent, or really recently, about 2 weeks ago. There was, there was not full clarity on what a form-based code would produce, and so we met with a consultant and said we felt like it'd be helpful to have a field trip. So we invited a number of people to that. I think we had about 12 or 13 on the field trip, and we visited 3 locations, 9th and 9th in Salt Lake City. This is actually an image of 9th and 9th. We also visited Holiday Village, I believe it's titled, and then Daybreak, which is a larger development, the type of development that could be produced under form-based code. All of these are the types of developments that can be produced under form-based code. That wasn't necessarily the tool that was used in their instance, but they ended up the same result. There were also a number of questions in the process about what the actual code ends up looking like and how it as a tool, the method or means that it uses to produce these types of developments. So I brought 2 physical copies of 2 different form-based codes to just pass around while I'm just showing you some photos. And these will show you what the actual codes end up looking like. They get fairly detailed in terms of the standards and things like that, so that they have a higher degree of predictability in the results of.
You don't follow
what's
spec
going.
books anyway, Carl. What are you looking at that for?
They're pictures.
And in all seriousness, that's actually one of the great advantages of form-based code, is that they do rely on graphics and pictures so that both the developer and the public can understand them easily, and they know more clearly what they're going to get. So this is a photo from 9th and 9th. We're probably gonna go through a number of these really quickly.
Where are we thinking of making this?
There are 2 areas in the city that are identified in the general plan. They're the south town area that's around 2000 north, and then what's identified as the downtown, which is centered around 2600 north in Washington, and then
So 2,000 north is around Kurtz, and a little bit
Right.
farther
All
north.
properties
Probably
that
from about-
are on Washington Boulevard or 2700 North, so this is just properties along the state highway,
Okay.
not into the neighborhoods and stuff.
So how does this work with UDOT then?
They've been involved,
Okay.
I mean, not heavily involved, but they're definitely, we've met with them as part of this, and we will when we have the roadway proposal
Cause doesn't this
need to get
affect
their
sidewalks
approval.
and stuff like that and everything, so that would
Yes.
affect the UDOT stuff, okay?
Yes.
And related topic to your question about the thoroughfare, in tandem with the form-based code, part of it is also a complete streets project, which adds the capability for pedestrians to reasonably walk and creates an environment that accommodates both the automobile and pedestrians.
So one of these places locally is Grant, that they just did down in Ogden, right? Along Grant, between about 20.
Just west of the LDS.
West of the temple?
Yes.
Just, that would be a kind of a form-based code, correct?
Kinda? That would be a complete street, if you're talking about what's within the thoroughfare. So the complete streets address the street parts of things. Form-based codes are more comprehensive. They address both the buildings and the streets, but they focus on regulations for the buildings that create a walkable downtown. So.
Cheryl, I'll stop talking.
The form-based code itself focuses more on the building design.
Okay.
It allows
building
us to kind of
itself.
establish what we'd like to see without really the developer going through the whole approval process, what about this, what about that, what
Okay.
about this with the city,
It
it's kind of
says
already
up front,
established.
here's what the
Yeah.
city is hoping to see with this development, and then the developer operates within that.
I think Midway just did this too, so.
Okay, so let me show you some more of these pictures. A form-based code is not, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. Okay, so, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing, and that's the purpose of the charrette that we had, last Thursday. What you determine with the form-based code is, okay, how tall do we want the buildings, how wide do we want the sidewalks? How do we want a space between the buildings and lower density areas, and all these sorts of details. So those details, as you figure those details out, they're gonna determine the character of the downtown that you have. And so in the charrette, we went through a process of determining what height of the buildings we wanted in certain areas, whether we wanted an area to have a more mixed use or commercial type of feel, or a more residential type of feeling, issues like that. So this is a photo of the group, and this is again, so you see these are one-story buildings, but you'll notice that there's a lot wider sidewalk, and there's areas for dining on the street, things like this, that the wider sidewalk allows. What you'll notice is we're not taking away the ability of the area to accommodate the car, but what we are doing is, generally speaking, in your downtown areas, you're putting the parking behind the building so that you're allowing the pedestrians to have an enjoyable environment where they want to come and relax and enjoy themselves, a place where they feel like they can actually relax and be, and then they spend money and stay as a result of that. So that, you know, one precedent that most of us would relate to would be, now I've forgotten the name, in Farmington, the Farmington Station, right? So if you notice, it's a walkable environment once you get inside of there, and yet a lot of the buildings are maybe 2 stories, there's probably 3-story buildings, but it's a relatively small scale. And so it's a place where people can go and enjoy themselves, and they end up spending money as a natural byproduct of enjoying being there. So sorry, was there another comment? So probably the group favorite among the 3 places that we visited was Holiday Village. So I'm gonna just sort of focus on pictures from that.
Holiday Village, about, where is that about?
I don't have an address on hand,
45th
but it's
South
about.
and Highland Drive?
What is it? Pardon me?
Is that where it is?
Pretty close.
Highland Drive and like 45th South, right around there? That
Yes.
intersection is redeveloped.
So this is in Daybreak, and we'll just move through these, and I'll point out the Highland Village ones as we go through. So this is in Daybreak. One thing that's important to notice is that you can have higher densities and have them feel good and be pleasant if you regulate the design a little bit more closely. And so it takes away some of the issues, concerns that people have. Next, please. This is an example of Holiday Village. There's a generous plaza out front. There were some concerns about the plaza being bare. but notice the buildings are 2.5 stories. And the group really liked the traditional architecture and the feel of them. They felt that the public space was good, but if they added some more trees or something, that might be a little bit better for the public space. This is another shot.
And that was on a street, by the way, similar in like traffic count to Washington or 2700 North, a very busy street. That's why they kind of had the wider sidewalk to make it just feel a little different, even though it was on a busy street.
Next, please. And next, please. I'm just gonna keep going through it until I find one of the back. So this is another shot of the front. Next, please. This is an alley in Daybreak, so to show where the parking is for these particular townhomes. There's some traditional ones in the background. These are more modern. The group preference was traditional. Next, please. This is, again, the front of Holiday Village. Next, please. This is 9th and 9th. Next, please.
What's gelato?
See a lot of pictures of gelato. Did you guys spend a lot of time there?
What is gelato?
Unfortunately, no.
Gelato's
Italian ice
like
cream.
an Italian ice cream.
Oh.
So
It's written into the code.
Is that what it
Yeah.
Next, please.
It's required.
Must have a gelato
Yeah.
store every 3
Okay, so
buildings.
this is the Holiday Village, but you'll notice this is what the parking lot looks like. You'll notice the quality of the architecture on the back of the building is one thing. This is one thing that the group really liked, is that the back was still high quality building materials and felt good to the people. So that even though the parking was located in the rear, you didn't feel like you were in this back alleyway and it was dark and dank and stuff like that. So.
And that is something that's common in a lot of form-based codes, is to have the parking behind instead of that feeling of like just a sea of asphalt right out front. You'll see there's the wider sidewalk or the plaza, then the buildings, and then parking behind.
I know that, I'm trying to, about 2100 south and like 7th east, that area there, and I don't know what city that is, Salt Lake or whatever, but I know they've tried to do a development to where it encourages walking and biking. The parking is horrendous there. It just is. So they want, and I was talking to somebody and complaining about it because it sucks to park there, but they got a lot of restaurants and some shopping areas there and stuff, and they said the plan was to encourage walking, to park, several blocks away and walk through that area and stuff. Is that kind of the same idea, or?
We're
If the parking's
not
terrible, I'll just stay.
planning on, no, we wanna make sure parking is still how most people in North Ogden are gonna get anywhere, so no, there'll still be parking, but maybe it will be behind the building, so it's just aesthetically looks different than you have the huge parking lot and then the building, way back. So, the parking will be there, it just, you may not see it from the road as much. Focus more on the building, not the parking lot.
Can you go to this one? Okay, so I'll just end on this. This is just another example of, you can see another option for the parking is that the parking is out on the street, but this is angled parking. So the goal is to not put a separation by parking lot between the sidewalk and the building. That creates a pleasant environment for the pedestrian. And then one of the things that you can also add in there is dining and other activities that allow people to stay and spend money because they're in a destination that they want to be in and linger in. So, are there any questions?
So where are we in the process, Brandon? Can you just give a little update?
Sure. So we had the charrette last week, and sort of the consultant had us use pictures to determine we want this type of building and this height of building in this area. I think it was 2 to 3 stories was usually what was common in the areas that were going to be more mixed use. And then the consultant is now taking that information and turning it in from those pictures and feedback on pictures of how buildings should be better into an actual code. So the finished product will be something similar to one of these two codes that I passed around based on the feedback that was given in the charrette that will say the building in this area has to be between 2 and 3 stories. It has to have 40 to 70% of the first floor facade be glass. I'm just giving you examples. The primary entrance has to be in the front. There has to be a minimum of an 8-foot sidewalk. Details like that are the small little rules that add up to get you buildings like what you've been shown. So, and I believe they said that they'll be back with us sometime in around 6 weeks. And so I've been in touch with them and I'll continue to follow up.
Have we talked a little bit with any of the developers currently that are looking at like the old Smith's building and stuff like that about some of these design criteria?
The old Smith's building is not really a candidate for this because it's already set up as a more strip mall with the building set back and the parking. So that one's gone, but where we have talked to someone is developer for 2700 North.
Where America
and
First
Washington.
is and
That
all
20 acres is a prime
Okay.
opportunity to really have a more thought out development from the start that has this better aesthetic look. And really, I've gone to a lot of them. When we went to that one in Draper, if you remember the village we were looking at there, and it had all the stores right on 123rd South. The parking was behind or in between in some cases, little lots in between, but the parking was behind, and then you had your mid-box stores behind that. But it had a much more pleasant feel having those buildings right onto 123rd South versus set back behind the parking. So that's an example of this kind of a project. Where it would apply here is something that the council is really gonna have to consider. If this is going to be a mandatory rezone that the city is initiating or a voluntary overlay. The committee's had a lot of discussion on that, so that's one of those hot topics that, will come to you to really resolve. There's good arguments on both sides, so it's just something to think about. Where I see this form-based code really giving us some help is a lot of our Washington Boulevard has already been zoned R4, which I think is a terrible zone to have on our street that we wanna make our main street, because someone could dump a bunch of duplexes in R4, nothing we can do about that. Somebody could put some junky fourplexes in there on Washington Boulevard in R4 zone. So I think this form-based code, it does make the project more expensive, but the advantage to the private market is it's now worth that much more, or has more density, because we give some bonuses on the other end. So there's a way to make it a win-win for the private sector and for the city. So we get a better looking product for our city to be proud of. The private sector had to spend more, but it's worth more, and they have more density at the end, so they come out ahead too. So those are just some things to be thinking about as this goes through the process. Councilman Sanders.
One of the possibility is that property out 2700 could be purchased by 3 individuals, 3 entities, and our form-based code will bring them, hopefully,
Right.
bring them together and make it look more.
Because that's an ideal place for a project similar to that one we looked at on 123rd South. It's about the same size, same frontage. So yes, it would ensure a more cohesive development, because we do have a lot of pockets, some of them quite large, on 2700 North and on Washington, where this form-based code could really just help raise the appearance of the developments and give the private market opportunity to make more money to balance out those higher costs by giving them these, density bonuses or something like that. Because I think density for a higher quality project is always a win, because I'd much rather see a higher density project that's really nice than some duplexes and fourplexes dumped on a vacant property on Washington Boulevard that I don't think will look great for very long.
On that note, we didn't go there, but when the guy from South Salt Lake City came in, he was talking about some property that they had gone through, done the form-based code. It was on Transportation Corridor, but he said before they started it, there was less than 100 units demand, even though, and they had what, one 300-unit building going in now, and there was another bigger one that was in process too. Because as the property developed, it went from where it was really undesirable to where now people want to build there and live there.
He gave a version of the same presentation that you saw done last week that I saw just before the charrette, and he said that they had, their market study had anticipated, they'd say there was about 100 units anticipated, and what they had received as of last week was application for 1,000 units along the corridor. So, follow up on one point on the mayor's, just something to think about. The debate between an optional zone or a mandatory zone, if one of the goals is cohesive development, you may want to consider looking at a mandatory zone. The reason being is that if you do it as an overlay, or sorry, not an overlay, but an optional zone, then you can get these sort of pockmarks of the form-based code with the buildings in front, and then the next one over is entitled to develop with the parking lot in the back, which presents a problem in creating that whole destination that's cohesive. So something to think about if the end goal is to create a desirable cohesive environment.
Let's go, Carl, then.
So just as I was perusing through that, I don't know, one of those ones I was looking at.
Picture book?
Picture book, thank you. It's very detailed, talks about height and how much building face you can have, and doesn't our city code only allow a certain height of buildings maximum? And is this going to require us to change some codes? And my other thought too is and I've never walked any of these that I could think of, but I know that some of the buildings nowadays, they want to do like a store on the lower part, maybe have some apartments above, and then actually behind it, they have a parking structure. Yeah. Would that address that, and would that have to change some codes on our end too?
It would be a code change, yes, because to get a form-based code to work, it has to offer some benefit to the private market versus what, maybe they were able to do besides. So yes, there's some trade-offs. Hey, we'll allow a two-story building where previously we only allowed one with apartments above it or something. But the upside is the whole thing now looks beautiful like what we saw here versus something lower quality that could have been done. So yes, there would be zone changes like that. Brandon, what do you want to add to that?
Yeah, to follow up on that, there's a reason why it's called form-based code, and I don't want to get too technical about it, but most zoning that most people are used to is called Euclidean zoning, and what it really means is use-based zoning. And so you have, generally speaking, a single primary use in a zone. With form-based code, in most form-based codes, the intent is to allow a compatible range of uses, but not necessarily all the same use, as long as they are designed, the building form, which is the word for 3D shape, as long as the building form is designed to be compatible with the neighboring buildings. So in your example of, retail on the first floor and an apartment up above, that's actually a mix of uses right there. And so when you switch to form as the guiding principle by which you write the code, the trade-off is that you get higher design quality, but you also lose a little bit of control on the types of uses that are allowed, because there's a mix of uses that's allowed, generally speaking, by right, because you've set more precise design controls to say, you can do a range of these things as long as it looks and feels this way. And that's an important point, because the single-use zone is so ingrained in culture of planning and things like that, that some people don't realize that is a switch that is occurring. The hope and the ideal is that you're setting these design guidelines reasonably and carefully enough that doesn't cause problems. And in the many form-based codes I've seen that are done right, it works very well. So.
And did you sell it? Okay. Any other just general questions or discussion on this one? I mean, it's kind of more of an update than anything. I know we have representatives from both bodies on the committee, so. Okay, then the committee will keep working. Later this year, we'll probably have the first draft out of the committee, and then it's gonna go to planning commission for review of the whole commission, and then to the council for review.
Isn't there an open house plan sometime too, to kind of roll out some of this?
Yes, I don't think we have a date, right, but are we, in general, is that expected after, at what point? When the committee kicks out the draft, when planning commission goes through draft, what do you, or have we decided that yet?
I don't think we've decided it
Okay.
yet, but, the next step for the next month or two is to work through drafts of the code, among city staff, as I
Okay.
recall.
So yes, there will be an open house, we just, gotta determine when the right time to do that is. Okay, anything else on form-based code? All right, with that, let's go back to public comments. Mr. Watson, you stayed here the whole time, anything you'd like to say?
Yeah,
Okay, time's yours.
it's all good. So,
Name?
I was getting there. That too.
Routing
Got my
number,
cat card
account
from the
number.
base, I'll give you that. No, Robert Watson, I live, same as my wife, 1820 North, 100 East.
That's good.
You want to know how many kids we have and all that good stuff too?
That's good enough, yeah, we're good.
We have one on
would
the
like to
way,
know.
you know. So I really just wanted to say thank you. This is really just my second time coming to the city council here in North Ogden, just to be a normal citizen and listen. It's really been beneficial to see all the discussion that happens and the concern that is shared. So just like I said, as a normal everyday citizen, I just really like seeing that. So take that for what it's worth, right? But we're also grateful. My wife texted me and said, make sure you tell them thank you, thank you, thank you. We're just grateful that we have the opportunity to come and to voice our opinions and our views and feel like we've been heard, whether or not it all goes our way or it goes some of the way. Just knowing that you're being heard is really, really great and helpful for us. So thank you very much for that. Sorry, I had to write some things down. I do want to stress, we're not trying to push for anything unsafe. We do have 4 kids already. We do have another one on the way. We love kids. We want them to be protected. We don't want to push anything that's unsafe. So I hope that we're not, that's not what it's sounding like or what it's looking like. I think my wife put in quite a bit of time. Some of you that went on the field trip saw her, even her mock-up. That's the engineer in her, and I'm an engineer too, so I appreciate that. But seeing things, visualizing things, you've seen some calculations that she's done and everything, so she's put a lot of time into this. And I was gonna say, I'm glad to hear that there's data out there. I did a quick search just to look at the 40 by 40 triangle on the intersection to see why that was put in place, and there's actually some good reports out there to kind of explain it, but I didn't really find too much on the adjacent driveway. But I'm glad to hear that there's been research at least looking at other cities. So anyway, thank you is really the bottom line. We're glad to be here and glad to call North Ogden home.
Thank you, Mr. Watson, appreciate it, and appreciate your input and your wife's as well, so thank you. Okay, let's do our comments. Annette, any comments you'd like to share? Thank you for getting our YouTube and everything up and running. Annette has been leading the effort to get all this hooked up and going, and it's been a success, so thank you. It turned out good. John, do you have anything?
Just along with that, so just always remember now, everything you say is gonna be on video record, and I'll probably say this several times over the next couple of meetings, not saying that you guys go inappropriate, or anything like that, but just remember, sometimes it's a little more difficult to remember. Once we get used to it, we just need to remember that, it's a public meeting and
Basically, we have a body cam on now during all meetings, so, yeah, that's a great reminder.
So, just legally, today, one of the first thing on the consent agenda, we approve the minutes. Those are written minutes.
Mhm.
So, in a court of law or legal or whatever, what is the official document? The video, the recording, or the written minutes?
the written minutes. That's
What if they don't agree
So
for some reason?
So what the state code says is the written minutes are the official record of the meeting, And in fact, the recordings and videos can be deleted after a certain, is it 7 years, Annette?
It's 3.
We
But
do
the-
dispose of the recordings after
We
a
do.
certain
But
period of time.
the written minutes are kept essentially forever, so.
And state law, that's a good question, may change as there's more cities
just
going
curious.
to the, but right now, that's how it is in state law. Minutes are the record of the meeting, so please make sure they're good.
If there is a discrepancy and we find that out, can we go back and amend the written minutes to agree with the?
So as long as you have a majority of the same council members, does that make sense? So essentially, it's gotta be the same public body, so if it went through the election cycle, it confuses things, so it's typically, if it's a majority of the same people who were in the meeting approve an amendment, then that can happen to become the official. But I would, after 2 or 3 months, that shouldn't happen, and my impression is, that it's kinda locked in if it's not caught. That's why we read the minutes and approve them when we do it. And you've all been really good, especially, not saying that the council doesn't do as good of a job, but the planning commissioners, a lot of the time, catch things and make corrections almost every time we pass the minutes now, and it's nice to see, them actively reading them and saying, oh, I didn't say this is what I thought I said, and it's kinda fun.
One more question.
Yeah.
Grammar requests. If someone comes in, can they grammar request the recordings and the video and the written, or what does it cover?
Yeah, it would cover any public document, which would be all 3 of those, and the packets, so
Now,
anything.
If the video's already on YouTube online though, we don't have to supply it, right?
So what we do is we just point them to where it's kept. If they couldn't find it, we would have to supply it, but, I mean, my guess is we'll keep a copy at the city offices of the videos, or will it just be online?
They'll be online for right now until we get the equipment to do that.
Okay. But they're
Also-
recorded in a digital format online, and they'll stay on the city channel for.
And
as
that'll
long as-
probably be a future work session topic, just how long do you wanna keep them, cause they are large files.
Mayor,
So,
actually, the
video-
city council did pass ordinance that said we would keep them 3 years. That is not the state code.
Okay.
That's
That's
what the
going
city
above the
passed,
state code.
because the state's only a year.
So, good things to think about though, just, we are, on recording, and, check those minutes, because that will be the first thing that would go to court. I imagine, Johnny, you can probably tell us if you've seen recordings or videos also be used. What do you see the courts do?
The only time that they would be used is if there is a major discrepancy, if it looks like someone tampered with the official minutes. But I've never seen a situation where it looked like someone tampered with the minutes. I mean, it doesn't happen because it's the paper trail's there and it's established, so. We have had people request the recordings though, but particularly with the council, our minutes are so exhaustive that, we pretty much capture everything most everybody says, so.
Okay, Rob, anything?
Jumped over to me.
We're doing staff first.
Thank you. The things I've been thinking about is, as we go through these various ordinances and that, my list of ordinance desires is expanding. And at some point in time, I would like to make some recommendations on what really should be our priorities for those ordinances. There's a couple of them out there that I think are really crucial that we just haven't been able to get to.
Okay. Good, I think that'd be good for everyone to know what those are. What you're seeing are concerns or.
Yeah.
Okay, Brandon, anything? Okay, let's just go planning, commission, and council. Anyone who would like to do anything, we'll start with Carl. And then
Okay.
just go around.
Real quick, I'm assuming that Lynn attended this before, but I went to the Utah Mosquito Abatement Annual Meeting on Monday and Tuesday, got home today. By the way, sitting with a bunch of PhDs in entomology was riveting. But have you been to these before? Oh, my goodness. There was one part that was really good, and then but one thing I did pick up, which was actually really good. The lunch was okay. It was up at Midway, which, by the way, was beautiful. They had this little manual that's called for local and special service districts. I grabbed every extra one they had. They had 5. I think it's really good, and I think it applies to city council and probably to the planning commission. Talks about open meetings, closed meetings, the training. It's just a real quick little manual given to us by the state auditor. It does give you a website where you can find this whole manual at, and I'd like to just leave this with whomever would like to take some and look at them. Maybe I'll just give them Mayor and you can get them from him or whatever. But they're really, honestly, when we were going through some of the training and stuff today, they would ask questions and you could like open up to, about grammar requests or about internal controls, and just, they were really actually pretty cool little manuals. So I just wanted to share that with you. And that's all I got right now.
Okay, so they're here for whoever's interested, and if not, we'll keep some here.
I keep, Mayor, like I say, I just peruse it and, because it's pretty cool. It's pretty good information.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing new to add.
One thing I've been thinking about, next year, the traffic realignment over here on 2600 for the intersection change. Do we have somebody from the city that is dealing with UDOT on that, or?
Yes, me and our city engineer principally.
Because in that mix, I mean, is it something that we can get maybe some participation to, I know we talk about closing that bottom end of Pleasant View Drive and routing it down 300. Is there a way to incorporate that in that at this time to try and get that? Because I'm sure they're going to put a median up in front of the entrance to Lee's at least, but still that whole problem of cranking left right after the light on the Pleasant View Drive. I don't know if there's funds available with UDOT to help facilitate that or incorporate that in the mix of the desire, the need to have that.
It's been discussed. It's just the challenge is connecting Pleasant View to Longman View, so people would have a way to get around.
What do you mean?
Get from Pleasant View to Washington via Longman View.
To go north.
What'll happen is that the left-hand turn on Pleasant View will move up to Loman View, which is a 20-foot wide road. And so all the traffic will go there past the nursery and then turn right, as opposed to turning left at the light and then going up 300 and turning. So I think what he's talking about is just, we're looking at our options on how we can get the traffic flow to go the way we want it to, not the way that.
Because closing the road involves also getting a route from Pleasant View Drive up to Longman View, so that people don't just get stuck down at a closed Pleasant View. It's a pretty heavily used road.
Well, Pleasant View it doesn't close, it turns behind Lee's at 300.
Right.
And then goes down to 2700. So instead of coming out to Washington, it would end at 2700. So and if
Where
it
there's
pushes the
gonna be a
people
light.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
That light will take care of some of that on its own, without closing the road.
I see what you're saying, though.
I think we all do, but we haven't come to a
So,
workable agreement.
just so you know, kind of the timeline for everyone, UDOT is expecting to have a plan done by the end of this year of what they want to do with 2600 and what they want to do with Washington. And I shouldn't say what they want to do. We're heavily involved in the discussion. It's not like they're just coming in and, hey, here's the plan. So, I mean, at the end of the day, UDOT's putting up the money, so they're gonna, if there's push to shove, have the final say. But we're looking at stuff that I'll bring up as well. It's just, I'm not sure we're ready to close that, because there's so many people that come from Pleasant View on that. But, I don't know, that's just me. Maybe if there's other feelings on it.
One other thought is, until we've really figured out what we're gonna do with the old Public Works building property, I'd like to have that part of the thought process.
So it's definitely a problem though. We
Well,
all
just
recognize
part
it
of that is,
'cause-
while we still own the Public Works building, because between 300 and Washington, we have the Public Works building, and then you have access to that lower parking lot at the vet. And we would need to build some kind of driveway from their upper parking lot to lower parking lot, and probably swing that out into the Public Works property. You know, make like a road that goes down and connects two parking lots to eliminate their access on the Pleasant View Drive if we closed it. So while the city still controls the property or anything, that would need to be
That's what
incorporated.
the master plan calls for, is you could go down Pleasant View Drive and then go north somewhere around the Public Works facility and hit Loman View, then go down and make your left if you're trying to go north on 450 East. Or turn right to go south. So that's kinda, but it does involve that other route up to Loman View. Otherwise, you're forcing everyone down 300 East to 2700 when they just wanna go south on Washington. Now it's.
Yeah, but it's the same coming in and out of Lee's. You gotta make that whole loop anyway.
Yeah.
But we force the traffic down 300, that puts the light that much more further ahead of the schedule with UDOT to say, hey, now all these other cars are going down 300, let's get the light in now and try to solve both of the problems of getting out onto 2700, both at that road and out of Lee's.
Okay, yeah, well, good
Anyway.
discussion, and that is something we'll discuss in the next meeting. Anything else? Okay.
Just to thank the planning commission that's here and staff and all the work that you've done on helping us get through, these ordinances and figuring things out and making a good decision on what's best for the city and balancing rights here and rights there. It's, it's nice not to have to make these decisions in a vacuum. So appreciate all your work.
Ditto. It makes me more appreciative of the work you do when we struggle with just the few things we talked about tonight. And to your suggestion to get to the ordinances you want us to get to, I welcome that. I think that's ought to be table soon. And then just one quick note, the last time I talked to Dave Espinoza, we're buying another GPS unit. Does that come up? We've got in the city GPS units, but there's one that's really very accurate. And going back to this project that I've been pushing along to do all the depreciation, means we've got to know where all the assets are, and this new unit will make it possible. We have to be able to identify where all of them are, and we're missing a lot of that, and it can go pretty fast with this new unit. It'll help us to get to the juncture I want to be at when we get to our next budget meeting, which is to try to give us some idea of what that depreciation amount is for all the assets we know about.
Steve, anything?
Okay, I just got a couple real quick things. Storm drain is really hot topic right now in the county. I mean, it's a hot topic. There's just been, in these heavy storms we had recently, flooding out west. It's on everyone's mind, the importance of detaining as much water in our cities before it gets sent out west, where it used to be all farmland, now there's neighborhoods. So this is something that, just heads up, it's gonna just keep coming up. So I've worked very closely with Public Works Director, and we are gonna be detaining a lot more water in our basins, just as a matter of regular course of action. So, where you might not have seen water in the detention basins as often in the past, it'll be there in the future during the storm and for up to about 24 hours after the storm, before we then let it out once there's not a risk of flooding out west. So all the cities are very involved in this right now. There's going to be a conference later this month for all the mayors and public works directors of all the cities to strategize on this. So just heads up, I know there's going to be some more stuff in the budget we need to do next year too for some of our basins to improve them. So, hot topic,
It's gonna have the most effect on those that are upstream the most, probably, like North Ogden.
yeah.
Make sure when those cities to the west, because I've listened to them as I've developed, blaming everybody upstream for their water, make sure they realize that we handle all the forest water too. You know,
Absolutely.
so we're not,
We
you know,
have
we get blamed
two
to be the most
mountains-
uphill.
We have two mountains that
But,
drain into our city.
you know,
So we
water
start with
passes
a ton
through
of
us
water
just
at
like
our
with them.
borders, even though there's not a city to our east. So that's completely acknowledged. It's also been acknowledged that some of those cities don't have very stringent storm detention standards of their own, you know, are contributing to their own problem. So there's a lot of things that need to change. By no means is it like all on us, absolutely. And the county's looking at doing some things to account for water that comes off county areas, east and north of us, the mountains. You know, 'cause like I say, the canal, some of the creeks are already chock full by the time they even hit our incorporated borders. So it's just something that's really is a big issue. They had a lot of flooding in this last storm in far west. Part of the problem was it's the third 100-year storm that I can remember happening in the last 10 years as well. So, Carl.
Well, Salt Lake City is now changing their ordinance to where developers have to, property owners have to maintain their stormwater on their property. So they're causing them to do underground detentions and all these other types of things that,
That's coming because the EPA is requiring it.
So,
For all cities, that'll be coming to a city near us next year.
so actually, on that note, we found out, we had the discussion about that in planning commission, and I believe, I can't remember what meeting, but you were involved as well. But the EPA, the state has backed off on that requirement of on-site detention residential in new developments, residential developments, until 2019. So they got a lot of feedback and said, okay, well, we'll wait 3 years to implement this.
But-
So, right around the corner.
Well, and I was gonna say, that doesn't mean that the city has to. I mean, if we want, we could say on-site detention, pass an ordinance and make developers do it tomorrow, and that's,
It's just one of those things that it's gonna have to be attacked from both ends, because our cities in the east are growing, and there's just less areas where the water used to run, maybe off the mountains and stuff. It's all roads and sidewalks now, so it all runs somewhere into those gutters, and we're getting a lot more water. And then again, where it all used to run out west is all farmlands. It didn't matter when the canal breached, because it just was extra water. Doesn't work anymore, because there's neighborhoods on both sides of the canal, you know, and rapidly growing out in those western cities. So
maybe Bangor ought to turn his pumps on.
yeah, or bring one up to pump some water over 89 or I-15. So
That's a whole.
I'm just kind of just giving you a heads up that we are working hard on it. Our city, I think, is one of them in Weber County who's made the most progress, really. During this meeting, I was able to say 4 or 5 things we've already done with our storm drain system to start getting ready for this. So I'm proud of where we are, but it's just something we're really gonna have to spend some time and money on, and look if we're really collecting enough in our storm drain utility fee. You know, that'll be a discussion next budget year, because, you know, we've gotta get our water out of the canals, and I think that's gonna just come sooner than later. So that's a lot of the problem. The canals have way too much water in them during these rainstorms, because so many neighborhoods are connected and dumping their water into the canals. So, just some things to think about. What you'll definitely see though is our detention basins will have a lot of water in them during rainstorms. So, okay, that's everything I've got. So is there a motion to adjourn?
Water quality, any more on that?
Water quality, thanks for bringing that up. So, there was an article in the Standard Examiner over the weekend that multiple, if not most, Utah cities have what they called an excessive amount of a cancer-causing element called chromium-6. This article was not factual, not correct in several key respects, and
North Ogden was reported as one of the highest in Weber County. I posted a statement on Facebook about it, but basically, the long story short is, this all came out of a press release from an environmental group that has a very strong opinion about this chemical, made some statements that are not accepted by the federal government currently, that this is a cancer-causing chemical. It's not been determined as such by the EPA. It's in review and has been since 2008. So the EPA is 8 years into a determination of if this is even a carcinogenic chemical. The article also tied in, because the EPA has set a standard of 100 parts per billion in water of this chromium-6 chemical. North Ogden's level is 0.51 parts per billion, about 1/196th of the EPA requirement. So not even remotely close to the amount that the EPA has set as the standard. California has set a standard of their own of 10 parts per billion, which we are still far below California's standard, which is the most aggressive standard in the nation. The article misquoted that California's standard was 0.10 parts per billion, which meant we were over it, but that's not correct. There's a big difference between 10 parts per billion and 0.1 parts per billion. An engineer can confirm it for me. That's like 10 decimal points.
So did you reach out to the
time.
author of the reporter or anything, or did you, or you just posted on
No,
Facebook?
I haven't. I mean, it's just frustrating because it's not, we're not anywhere close. And this is according to the environmental group's test. Our tests don't show any chromium. And I posted those to Facebook too, we regularly test our water for it. But even if we accepted the environmental group's testing, it's still not even remotely close to the California standard or the EPA standard. So the water is totally safe. It's meeting or exceeding, and in every case exceeding all requirements. The article unfortunately just did not present the accurate information of what the standard is, and that where that decimal point was located made a completely different story, which just wasn't accurate. Whether it was a mistake or whatever, I don't know. So that's where that is. So any questions on that? Because that is it's an important thing. People are like, whoa, our water contains like all this cancer-causing item at a much higher rate than California allows. No. Okay, then is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. The meeting is adjourned.
Did you read any comments on standard site? Or some of the comments?
So, yeah.
One of the comments was, I guess y'all better move out of Utah or something. I was just like, no.